You, Heather. Okay, I'm going to call the hearing to order. This is the Historic Districts Review Board hearing for November 14th, 2023. So may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair Rios is
He is
excused.
excused.
Vice Chair Guida.
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Here.
Member Beachside.
Here.
Member Bienvenu.
Here.
Member Mather.
Here.
Member Valdo.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We have an agenda. I'm assuming this is the revised agenda that we all have here. Can we have are there any changes from staff?
Thank you,
Heather?
Guida. With reference to the agenda, there are notations on dates to be continued to. In particular, items number 8 and 9, 1120 East Alameda Street, are requested to be postponed to December 12th. With respect to item 11, 135 Grant Avenue, the request is to be postponed to January 9th. November 28th has been changed to January 9th, 2024. And that is.
And just to clarify, Heather, case 10, Grant Avenue, is that also being postponed?
Oh, yes, Chair Guido, that's to November 20th.
You, board members, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Moves to approve the agenda as amended.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
You, we then have approval of minutes. Board members, are there any changes to the minutes from October 24th, 2023? Seeing none. Oh, Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Chair Guida. I don't have any changes, but I did note that it seemed that the minutes this time were not as extensive as the last time, which I think we're all very happy with, the return to more extensive minutes. This is not quite as restrictive as what we'd seen more recently a few meetings ago, but I'm wondering if we can return to something that's got more information in it. It doesn't, as we've said before, it doesn't need to be as extensive as the minutes were originally. But I think the board is in general agreement that it's extremely helpful to have a record, the actual discussion. And this one seemed quite truncated, and I think it gives a misleading impression of how the discussion took place. And I know it's important even for board members to have accurate minutes. In fact, staff usually includes minutes from prior meetings whenever it's relevant to our decision making. And I always look at those. And if they were as truncated as the ones are that we received tonight, I think they would be essentially not, they'd be useless to us.
Reference to the minutes, you may know that city clerk has left the city. Spires is effectively employed by contract by the city clerk's office. So I had made an inquiry of Ms. Bustos Mahelsik before she left, but we didn't have the full answer. So I'll continue to endeavor and reach out to the interim city clerk, Carolyn Cardenas.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Maybe you can report back to us on that as to what the decision is. But with that, I think it's for purposes of tonight's meeting and the particular minutes that were submitted, I would move to approve them as submitted.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next item is approval of findings of fact and conclusions of law. I assume that there are none since none are present on the agenda. We'll move on then to matters from the public. Anybody wishing to speak in the room, please come down to the podium or in the line behind it. 2 minutes. Adam, I think your mic's off.
Okay. Adam Johnson, Executive Director, Old Santa Fe Association. Thank you. To start, I want to second Member Bienvenue's request to have more extensive minutes. I think that's a good thing, especially because they are referenced in cases and they are very helpful to understand the board's reasoning. I want to talk about something that happened, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was a very interesting discussion about the demolition of buildings without knowing what will replace them. I think that's a very important discussion, and I think that I agree with the sentiment of the board that this is a sort of absurd practice. I know that we are updating the land development code, and this is not something that we'll be able to maybe change right away, but I want us to be aware of this process going forward. It's concerning to me because the state government is requesting a demolition of 4 historic casitas on Don Gaspar, as well as the Concha E. Ortiz building on Galisteo. They're for office buildings in a post-COVID world, so it's sort of interesting that they are requesting an abundance of office space. And the thing is that I haven't had an interesting communication with Alexandra Ladd of the Affordable Housing Office. I think a way to bridge the gap between, or to sort of bring closer together historic preservation and affordable housing is to have the state, which does not want to maintain these buildings, donate them for affordable housing. And that would actually, is allowed under the provision of an anti-donation clause. There's an exception for affordable housing. And it would bring 2 public goods to the fore. It would bring historic preservation and it would bring affordable housing. I want to say on that case, because it's an important one, they're going to ask for a demolition without proposing something new, that another option, not just the affordable housing proposal, is that we have frontages of those historic casitas, much like the way that DC has historic buildings with big office spaces behind them that sort of work to combine the sort of historic and the modern. They offer ample space, but they offer a sort of historic picture of the Don Gaspar neighborhood, which is a historic district at the national level. So I just want to bring up these issues. I think that the board has done a really good job of discussing the sort of inconsistencies in the code, especially relative to demolition. And I think moving forward, a more robust discussion is at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Hi.
I'm Richard Martinez. I'm an architect. I just want to mention that one of the projects that you approved last month had to go to the city council for approval of exceptions. We haven't heard yet when that's going to happen, but I fear that we're going to be caught in the middle of this change, a possible change. So it's very important that this be approved or whatever, that it go forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Are there anyone online wishing to speak?
Chair Guida, no, there are no people with their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to staff communications. Any items from staff?
This time, no.
Thank you, Heather. There are no items under old business, so we're going to move on to new business tonight. We have a total of 15 cases minus 4, so 11 cases tonight. I'll encourage both staff and applicants to be succinct in their presentations. The staff spends a great deal of time putting together these reports for us, and there's no need to rehash a lot of the kind of smaller details. The board can always ask questions. I'll also say that if anybody disagrees with the decision that's being made tonight by the board, within 15 days of the acceptance of the findings of fact and conclusions of law, you have the ability to appeal the case to governing body. With that, we'll start with the first case, which is a consideration of the text amendment. Heather, are you presenting this? Okay.
Sharing my screen so I can go over the changes to the text amendment. The purpose of the changes to the text amendment is to provide authority, formal authority to the Historic Districts Review Board for granting exceptions. Until recently, the HDRB did act on items related to design and signage, but weren't specifically authorized by the code to do so. There were efforts to, or a policy memo that was pulled together in 2018, but it was never adopted by the board. So therefore, it was not in effect. So this is a request to cure an issue that it is clear that the Historic Districts Review Board has the expertise and a better ability to consider exceptions, and therefore it should not have to go to the governing body. So this is the text of the amendment, and I just want to go over quickly what the changes are. So the exceptions section has been reorganized to state that staff shall determine if an exception is required. The Historic Board may grant or deny an exception to the regulations set forth in 14-5.2 for height, pitch, scale, massing, and floor step backs, and design standards, preservation of historic materials, and a historic district special sign regulations under 14.8.10H. There are some changes. What we tried to do was to reorganize it so the exceptions are under one section, and so that one statement will cover height as well as design standards and historic preservation standards. And then exceptions are project specific and do not apply to subject property in perpetuity. So this was drawn from the heights section, height ordinance section. So that is nothing new, but it does actually apply to all exceptions in this particular case. And then if required, a HICB will be completed at the applicant's expense so that the board can better judge whether an exception is appropriate based on the status of the building. And then there are some strikeouts also in the signage section. So with reference to signage, the Historic Districts Review Board does review signage for exceptions or deviations from the code as it relates to signage. If signs are within the bounds of the code and is reviewed by our building permitting staff, then those signs are approved. So it's not like the Historic Districts Review Board would be out of the process if there was something that was deviates from the standards. So signage is also included in this section regarding not damaging the character of the district, required to promote hardship to the applicant or injury to the public welfare, and conclusively demonstrate that all design options have been considered, including technical reports, a report on the design process and programs, and to illustrate whether other options were not explored. And this is all language that is from the code currently. And I'm just going through the actual bill itself so that folks can see what these standards are, what the specific changes are. So with reference to signs, disapproval shall be indicated by the division on the application for a building permit, not a specific case before the board, and on each of the required submittals, all of which shall be signed by the division staff assigned to the review. The division shall report approvals and disapprovals to the board at its next regular meeting as an informational item. So this is being struck because we bring cases that do not comply with the standards to this board for consideration for approval and denial. Those sign permits that are within the requirements of section 14.8.10H, the Historic District Sign Standards, are approved. So I just want to mention that this board would not be completely out of the picture, as one were to say, when it comes to regulating sign standards. Additionally, if there was something that would have to go to the Board of Adjustment as well, there would be a report back to the board on that. Some other board was considering this potential variance. And as well, there is always the opportunity, so staff that reviews and approves a permit is considered the designee of the land use director. So in that case, if there's a disagreement on an approval of the sign, then that land use director decision can be appealed to this board. So there would be, situations where the HDRB would still be considering sign concerns and assuring that those standards would be met. And that concludes the presentation. So there's a lot of strike-throughs. This is a specific bill, and it's in your packet that relates to what is being presented to the governing body for review and approval. And as the Historic Districts Review Board is the first board to review and comment on this particular case, let me just back up. The process is that it was introduced by the governing body October 11th. So there's an introduction as well as a public comment period, and that was done on October 25th by the governing body. This board has to be the first board that reviews and makes recommendation to the governing body. That's what we're doing tonight. The bill would be going to the Public Works Committee on November 27th, to the Quality of Life Committee on December 6th, and to the back to the governing body for final review and approval on December 13th. That process was modified a little bit based on the fact that the city attorney's office requested that this board review first before the council committees. That way we could report to the board. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Heather. So you're looking for tonight a recommendation from the board, as well as any additional input or feedback on what's being proposed?
Yes, Chair Guida, that's correct.
Okay. And then whatever feedback that this board might relay, and I guess any of these other committees, Quality of Life or Public Works, those would be incorporated into what gets sent to City Council for approval.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for explaining. Board members, any questions for staff? Yes, Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Chair Guida. So I've already expressed my view on this particular set of revisions, which I think is shared by most, if not all, of the board, that we would like to keep the revisions as limited as possible in order to solve the very specific problem that's been hanging over our heads for the last year or so, which is the awareness that developed within that last year that there was something in the code that prohibited what we had been typically doing by practice, which was approving exceptions rather than recommending to the city council that exceptions be approved. So that's the big picture, but if I can just go a little bit granularly through this, I've got some specific comments as well. So on the design, well, first of all, the first proposed change is just to add or deny under subsection 5 exceptions. Is that just purely for clarification?
Guida, Member Bienvenue, that's correct.
Okay, that seems unnecessary, but it also seems non-controversial, so I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But under B, design standards, the striking out of the first sentence and the replacement with the second sentence is exactly consistent with what the board had already proposed be the change to be made to the ordinance to solve our problem. The only one thing I see in that section, though, that I don't believe the board specifically put in there is the clause that says that the board is the board reviewing and granting or denying requests. And this is the language I'm referring to, and in 14-8.10H for signs in historic districts. I don't think we had mentioned that before, and I'm just wondering why that was put in there, because I don't see anything in 14-8.10H that actually grants the board that authority.
Guida, Member Bienvenue, the board has the authority to review those exception requests for special sign regulations. As to the if a project complies with the regulations, then this board would not see it. It would just be for those cases, and there is board authority for that.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, you could point it out to me, or maybe the city attorney can. I don't see that in 14.810H. I do see the possibility that the board has that authority through 14.5.2 D10, which refers to signs specifically. That, I think, could be read to say that the board has authority over exceptions to signage. But 8.10H seems to only speak to the land use department. And I just didn't find anything specifically in there. So that'd be a question I would have as to whether there's any reason to include that language in this proposed amendment. Because I think it might be adding authority that the board doesn't necessarily otherwise have under the ordinance. But we can come back to that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot right here. A little bit further on, there's a change in the reference to where the notice requirements are found. And now it reads that those are found in 14-3.1H before it said 14-3.6B3. I assume that's just purely because the ordinance has been rearranged.
Member Bienvenu, that is correct.
Okay. In that case, I would say that we probably need to make the same change in subsection C, where it's still referring to 3.6B3.
Sorry.
Oh, I actually didn't pose that as a question, but it seems to me that it would be necessary to make the same change there. Would you agree?
Agreed.
Okay. And then coming back to the previous section, you've done a little wordsmithing to what's necessary to approve the exceptions. It doesn't seem that it's making any substantive change, but maybe seeking some additional clarification. Is that accurate as well?
Guida, Member Bienvenu, that's correct.
Okay. I guess in that particular case, I would say I would not tinker with that language because it sort of begs the question as to why we're taking this one sentence out of all of the confusing sentences in this ordinance and tinkering with that specific one. I would just leave it alone. I don't think it actually changes how we would approach it or what substance is being proposed for how the board should approach it. So I would leave that alone, and that would be the same in the next section where the same change has been made under subsection C.
Clarification, is that item 3 or 4 that you're referring to?
I don't know what item it is, but I'm looking at subsection 5B at the very end of 5B. It's the sentence that begins, the applicant for such exceptions shall conclusively demonstrate and goes on from there. All the changes to that I would reject. Just as being, not because I don't think that they're not better stated. I think they actually are. And I think that could be incorporated into the final revision of the land use code. And I would make a note of that I would certainly support that change. I just generally philosophically don't think we should be tinkering with language other than to correct the problem in front of us at this time unless absolutely necessary. And then getting to this changes to this subsection D10, signs and murals. I will just generally state I wouldn't change any of this either, but just to say why you've added the sentence, or the proposal is to add the sentence, if a proposed mural does not meet the criteria in the historic ordinance, an exception is required. But I find that an ambiguous provision because I don't know of any criteria in the historic ordinance for murals. So I think that might be referring generally to things like color and so forth, but that'd be speculation on my part. So I think it actually creates more questions than answers. So I would personally leave that out. And I would also not take out the language that the division shall report approvals and disapprovals to the board. I understand that that has not been the practice, and maybe that should not be the practice in the future, but I think that should be dealt with in considering the land use code as a whole, rather than, again, as a piecemeal change to the land use code, specifically with regard to murals of all things. And I would also leave in the potential referral to the City Arts Board for the same reason. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
The members of the board wishing to comment? I'll add that and Member Benvenu, I appreciate that there are a review of the text of what's being proposed. That I wholeheartedly agree, and I think I've stated before that this should have been a very simple change. You know, and I think Member Benvenu also pointed out a very differentiated between substantive changes and changes that were, you know, either just kind of hygiene or kind of simple text changes that don't really change the meaning. The one that rises to the top for me really is the changes that are being made that are directed at signage and murals. My understanding is that this board's, probably the Historic Division in general's, review of signs in the historic district is ambiguous at best at present. And to me, this is the biggest shift and change in what we do here, is this business of, you know, well, the board, you know, can look at exceptions and the rest of this is on staff. And I appreciate perhaps the need for greater clarity, but I guess I would agree that this is maybe not the juncture to do that.
I think I can answer Member Bienvenu's some of the questions he had about the signage issue. Yes, I agree. It's rather ambiguous because under subsection 14-5.2, which is where we do most of our work under the exception criteria, 5B, the heading, the subheading for that subsection reads design standards and signage. Nothing in there says anything about signs. So why is signage in the subheading? Then you look at D10 and it refers to signage, but it doesn't give you really any design standard. It talks about what the procedure is. And so it was my boss and my discussion that those design standards had to come from someplace. So they came from 810-H, and there's a big long section in there under that describes the design standards for signage specifically in the historic districts. It doesn't apply anyplace else. So we felt it was necessary to make that link. Now, whether or not the H board really ever had any authority to hear signs, further complicated by Historic District Review Board's marching orders, which is found in Code Section 14-2.6, C1, which reads that the H board reviews and approves and denies all applications for new construction, exterior alterations, etc., except signs. So you read that, and it says the H board doesn't review signs. But then it reads, staff shall review signs in accordance with Section 14-3.11. So more or less, it indicates that the staff has the administrative approval on signs. But what happens if an applicant wants to dispute the staff's conclusion because the staff is acting on behalf of the land use director? It's pretty circuitous, but this is our reasoning. 14-2.2, which gives marching orders to the governing body, reads that the governing body, this is 14-2.2 subsection G, the governing body delegates its authority for hearing appeals of decisions of the land use director to the respective land use board set forth in Chapter 14. So essentially, the governing body sends appeals back to the H board on things that involve staff administrative approval, such as signs.
Well, wouldn't that go to not this board, but Board of Adjustment?
Well, that's another discussion too.
Right. So I think the problem, Frank, is that, I appreciate the need for clarifying this, but we are in the midst of of a code rewrite process that can solve this problem. And, and I think and even though this conundrum that we are in here that led to this discovery that the board can only recommend and not approve, it was panic about the font size of a sign that we all of a sudden had to review, which this board in the past did not review signs for that building. This is backwards thinking to me. This is putting the cart before the horse. This matter is really about only restoring the ability of this board to rule on design exceptions as it has done for decades in practice. And I think that, an attempt to clarify the sign thing is misguided. And Member Benvenu pointed to several errors in this. And I don't think this is a place to do so.
And so I'm just telling you, that's how we got started.
I get it.
How we got going.
I get it. But it's you start pulling threads on the sweater, and this is where we wind up a year later. If there are no other comments from the board, I'll open this to public comment.
Okay, Adam Johnson, Chair Guida, members of the board. The Old Santa Fe Association supports giving the board authority for the text amendment, and we recommend that this is the most simplified, straightforward version is passed through the committees and to the governing body. I want to make a quick comment about staff approvals. We also support staff approvals in general, as long as there's oversight. The interesting thing about the way that this legislative issue is written is that it removes the requirement for the board to oversee the changes that the staff have approved. So that seems off to me, because there should be a check on the staff's work, not to say that they're doing poor work, but to say that we're all coming into alignment on these matters. So in the future, we would recommend that any staff approvals, and they could be an expanded sense or purview of the staff approvals, should have a mechanism where the board is overseeing that. Can be brief, does not need to be onerous to staff. It just needs to be a description and perhaps an image or an illustration of the sign change, so that we understand the operating procedures, and the board can agree or disagree. And the board should have a mechanism to appeal or sort of remove or flag staff recommendations. But long story short, let's go forward with the most simplified text amendment, get this done. We're working on the land development code update now, and let's fix that other things, as Chair Guida said during that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John LaCava. I just have a quick question. Hopefully this will be easy. Did I understand that exceptions to setbacks, is something that comes before the board and would need the board approval? And is that something that was in the, I thought I heard someone say exceptions, setbacks.
Setbacks are not the purview of this board.
Okay. I thought I heard someone say.
And Heather, you might have additional comments, but that's not what this board reviews.
Rita, with reference to setbacks, that is under the purview of the Board of Adjustments. Setbacks, there are things called step backs under the historic district. Yes. Under the historic district's ordinance, and that may be a reference. Step back of the building as not the location on the site, but stepping back a second floor.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Anybody else online wishing to comment? Thank you, Heather. So I would, and I'm sorry to be speaking so much. This has been an upsetting issue for me for a long time. And I think the board has been clear about the direction that we want to take on this, but I would also voice the concern that and this is a concern of applicants who have been, who have had a legal process changed on them in the midst of applications, have had to present and notice multiple times. Applicants who have spent inordinate sums with expensive consultants to get that work done, attorneys, land use attorneys, architects, engineers, and so on, that have made this process lengthier and have required additional late nights in this room. It makes an already exclusionary ordinance much more difficult and much more exclusionary. So I'm in favor, in light of what we've talked about, I'm in favor of all of those things, those revisions, but I'm also in favor of getting this done. And so I just wanted to voice that concern. There are a number of people in this room who have been penalized unnecessarily by this, at best, academic legal bickering. Any other comments from the board? Member Beachhead.
Just a question that was raised by Mr. Martinez. What happens to pending approvals that need to be heard by the governing body while this is happening?
Guido, Member Beachhead, the effective date of an ordinance is 30 days after the approval by the city council, the governing body. And so if this ordinance is approved, potentially as amended by the recommendation of the board, this board, then those cases that would be heard after the first meeting in January, so the effective date would be January 13th. And those cases that are heard after that time, the board will have that full authority. Until which time that the effective date has been reached, all of those cases must go to the city council for review. The board is a recommendation.
And so if they are not heard just due to the schedule before then, do they have to come back to the H board, or is our recommendation then adopted as approval?
Chair Guida, Member Beachhead, that the council schedule is determined by the city clerk, not by staff. So the key here is the Historic Districts Review Board date of approval or date of the recommendation. So so January 9th, for instance, is HDRB hearing night, and that would have to be sent to council for their review and approval if there was an exception proposed that night.
So is there the potential for the governing body to be hearing the old cases at the same time the H board is hearing the new ones? If their schedule doesn't allow them to hear everything that's pending now by the time it's effective? Yeah.
Chair Guida, Member Beachhead, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Heather, if I may, it would be likely for that period of time that applicants may request to be postponed till after this is finalized.
Yes, that is.
Which would be a delay, but maybe a shorter delay than going to.
And Chair
City
Guida, we've
Council.
been talking with applicants about the possibility of this approval and dates associated with it.
Yeah, and I'll add to my dismay, my professional dismay about this is, like this is discouraged applicants from doing the types of designs that may be very thoughtful designs, maybe appropriate responses for the specific conditions of a project, but have not wanted to bother with this process. And so, we as a community have been robbed of those kind of design ideas, of discussing them in front of this board and seeing them built, which is also a casualty of this discussion. I think the board needs to make a motion on this matter. We'll entertain one. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Chair Guida. I'd be happy to do that unless anyone else wants to take the lead. So I would move that the board recommend to the governing body that the board strongly recommends to the governing body that the following proposed changes be made to the ordinance, and the remaining proposed changes not be made to the ordinance for all the reasons articulated. So in subsection 5, under B, design standards and signage, that the board would recommend that all of those proposed changes be made other than the language in the clause and in 14-8.10H, comma, for signs in historic districts. That would be not accepted. And that the language altering the last sentence prior to the subparagraphs that begins, the applicant for such exceptions shall conclusively demonstrate, that no changes be made to that sentence as well. That in subsection C, the reference to 14-3.6B3 be changed to 14-3.1H. That the remaining proposed changes not be made to that section as for the same reasons as discussed, and that no other changes be made as proposed.
Do I have a second?
Each side seconds.
Any other discussion or amendments to the motion? Member Benvedere, maker of the
Well,
motion.
Yeah, just a point of clarification that I would like conveyed with that recommendation, if the board so agrees to this motion, is that this is not intended to disagree necessarily with any of the substantive proposals. It's just that the board strongly feels this is not the time or place to be making those piecemeal amendments, but they should be considered in the context of the larger amendment to the land use code.
Thank you for that. Okay. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Okay, first new business case is 918D, Asakia Madre. Ramon, this is your case. Is your applicant in the room? Yes, Richard is here.
Good evening, Chair Guida, members of the board. This is case 2023007314-HDRB. It's 918-D Asakia Madre. It's a contributing building in the downtown east side district. The building is located on a private drive south of Asakia Madre and sandwiched by Camino del Monte Sol to the west and Don Miguel to the east. In this slide, you can see the property outlined in red and the actual structure in yellow. The adobe structure was likely built in the 1930s and is visible from the 1958 aerial on the right. The footprint is unchanged. This is the south and the east and the south elevations. The east is above and the south is below. Additional photos of the south elevations. The north elevation and the west elevation are rather unremarkable. Drawings of the existing north elevation and the existing east elevation. Drawings of the existing south elevation and the existing west elevation. Staff recommends that the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing per 14-5.2C, designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff further recommends the east and the eastern portion of the south elevation be designated as primary, excluding non-historic doors and windows as described in the window assessment that is attached to your pack. Does anybody have any questions?
Board members, any questions for Ramon? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Just a quick question, Ramon. I think I asked you this in our last field trip, but I don't remember the answer. I'm just slightly confused, if you could pull that back up again, as to what exactly the recommendation is for the primary facades, just because of the language. I mean, it seems like you're proposing all of the elevations on the east and the south, but yet your language talks about just the east and eastern portion of the south
Yes.
elevation. And I'm just not squaring that and understanding what you mean.
Chair Guida and Member Bienvenu, I think I could have drafted that a little bit better.
Okay.
The diagram explains my intent more accurately.
Okay, that's helpful. So really, it's just the entire east and south facades, I mean elevations.
Correct.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
You, Chair Guida. Ramon, can you walk us through in this diagram which doors and windows are non-historic? Because I know the Hickby mentioned the carved wood door that was likely handmade, and I got the impression that that one was historic. So are all other doors on the east facade non-historic?
Chair Guida and Member Aguilar Medrano, I would refer to the historic assessment that's included in your packet. And it has diagrams of specifically what the doors and windows are in associated locations. And names as to whether historic or non-historic.
Okay. Do you think when we make a motion that we need to identify those windows and doors according to the window assessment, or do you think that would be sufficient just to refer to that window assessment in general?
I'm gonna ask Heather if she has input on this.
Guida, Member Aguilar Medrano. I believe that it might be good to call out the specific doors that are not considered historic, just so that the record is clear.
Okay, thanks, Heather.
Any other board members? Okay, may we have the applicant come down and be sworn in, please?
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, Martinez Architecture Studio, 1524 Paseo de Peralta.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, I'm unprepared to discuss that facade, that proposed primary facade, as is shown on the board, because it wasn't published that way. So my comments are about the eastern facade and the east facade and the eastern portion of the south facade. So I will be commenting about those, but I do have comments in general about what is proposed as the primary facades. As you might imagine, primary facades mean that development, any sort of addition on that side, whichever is the primary facade, is not allowed. And it makes it very difficult to add on to a house, especially a house like this one, which is very small. So keep that in mind as we go through the facades as they are. I hope everyone read the report, the historic report on this house, because it's very unusual. This house was originally off of Monte Sol. That's how it was built. And so the rear facade was actually the front facade, and the front facade now was actually the rear facade of the house. And the house was originally without plumbing. And so the bathroom and the kitchen have been added later. The kitchen may have been, but it was you know, you had to bring in the water for the kitchen itself. And so that's I think that's very interesting, and it gives a glimpse of what Santa Fe was like for a very long time. Given that the back was the front of the house originally, which I suspected when I first went and visited this house, and that the front was the back, it is quite apparent that the historic doors and windows were added in a self-conscious way because they don't match the other openings in the house, where it was less important to make it look like it was the front of the house after the fact. Can you pull the elevation? Right there, yes, thank you. The top photograph shows the east facade of the house. That was originally the back of the house. It's now the front of the house. That door is very beautiful. It has you know, like spindles, like cut wood in a pattern, and these beautiful old casement windows that don't really fit their space. In other words, the kitchen window goes down below where a counter height would be, things like that. And then it has this overhang over the front door, which is sort of unusual in the sense that it's not parapeted like many houses were, where the front of the house was the tallest part of the house, and then the roof angled to the back of the house. And perhaps it wasn't a parapet on that side because that's where the water drained off the house. And here, there is a overhang on that side. I think that this is the most historic facade because it's the least touched and affected over the years, and now it serves as the front facade of the house. However, I ask that overhang not be part of the historic part of the house because I think that the roof drainage should be addressed, and perhaps that a parapet would be there and over the front door instead of this overhang that's there. The eastern facade is off of the kitchen, is another one that I was prepared to talk about. That kitchen facade is not publicly visible. It's in the back of the house from the driveway that comes into this property. I am asking that not be made primary, that side, because being that it's off the kitchen, and if it's made primary, it makes it impossible to have some sort of outdoor portal, some sort of outdoor eating area off of the kitchen. And as you saw when you went up to the house, there is no outdoor portal space in this house. Also, given that this is the place where you park your car, there is no overhang for weather, things like that, so there's no passageway along that side. So I'm proposing that only the eastern side of the house that is in front of the kitchen and the living room be primary, and none of this side be made primary because it's not publicly visible, and because it would preclude any design elements to be added to this. Thank you.
Richard, board members, any questions for Richard? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Member Guida. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I heard everything you said, and I thought, much of it was quite persuasive, actually, but I'm just a little confused about what you're proposing. Is there a way to get the elevation of the footprint up again, Ramon, so that we can be on the same page here? Okay, so which parts of the eastern facade?
The long facade that's the furthest east, the first to the right.
So the north facade, north portion of the eastern elevation. Yeah, just to the corner. And nothing else, it sounds like. Right?
That's what I'm proposing.
That's all I wanted to understand, and I understand your reasoning. And just for my own clarity, because I can't quite see it, what do you have those designated as, Ramon, on your map there? It looks like in the circles. That
I think those are just maybe
they're-
window labels.
Those are the
those are the
window
window labels.
so
not
they're not
the pods.
designated.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Members of the public wishing to speak on this case, anyone in this room with a comment? Anyone online, Heather?
Chair Guida, no.
Thank you. Back to the board, perhaps for a motion. Member Bichard?
Thank you. In case number 2023-007314 HDRB at 918D, Acequia Madre, I move to maintain the contributing status of this building and designate the eastern facade, the longest portion of the eastern facade, which is consistent with the Hickey report, which indicates that this may be the oldest portion of the house. It's roughly 34 inches long wall as primary, and no other facades as primary. And including the historic windows A and B on this facade, and excluding the non-historic overhang.
Was the doors, or was the door included in?
Sorry, and the door, I think it's door number 3, I believe. The door on that facade as well. Yeah, all historic doors and windows.
Thank you, Member Bichard. Do we have a second?
Aguilar Madrano will second. With a quick clarification, that northmost door, door number 1, I think is actually non-historic, but it's the interesting hand-carved one. Were you including it in your exclusion, or?
Sorry, I was trying to follow the window and door assessment, which I guess indicates that is non-historic.
I think it said somewhere in the 1980s. Is that right, Ramon? Or sorry, Richard? Other one.
I believe that's true. It's not historic, but it is character defining, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think if we didn't include it in the exclusion and it's on the primary facade, then it would be protected.
Yes, I agree. Right, so just excluding the non-historic overhang and non-historic window.
Then Member Aguilar Madrano, are you seconding?
I will second. Both of the windows on that facade are historic, so I don't think we have to have language excluding them. windows B and A are indicated as historic, but yes, I will second.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case is also Ramon's. This is 1A Camino Pequeño. This is also a status case. Ramon is your applicant here. Okay.
This is case 2023007399-HDRB 1A Camino Pequeño is a single-family residence in the downtown and east side historic district. The applicant requests a review and status review and primary facade designations to evaluate future renovations. 1A Camino Pequeño is located on a private drive just east of the intersection of East Alameda and Canyon Road. Property here is outlined in red. The existing site plan, the property lines are indicated in red and the house in blue. Structure was built in 1973 as a mother-in-law unit by the artist and draftsman Frank Cuzio and is now available for this historic status evaluation. This is the south or front facade, camera facing north. Historic Properties Inventory Form states the home shows a mix of Pueblo and territorial revival themes. And I could also add the modern element of the cantilever porches at the south and north entrances. This is the back or the north elevation. The west elevation, and you can identify a replacement window to the right of the center. Those primary facade diagram described in the following staff recommendations would be the south and east. Staff recommends that the historic status of this structure be designated as contributing to 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff further recommends that the south and east facade be designated as primary.
Point of clarification, Ramon, your recommendation is contrary to that of the Higby report. Is that correct?
Yes.
Higby report says despite meeting the minimum threshold for contributing status as a property 50 years old, the house has no architectural significance or historical associations. For this reason, the recommendation is to maintain non-contributing status in the downtown and east side historic district. So,
Chair Guido, that's correct.
okay. And so can you just
Elaborate.
elaborate on your recommendation?
Yes, this is a unique site that was developed over a course of time. And when this mother-in-law's residence was constructed, it captured kind of an architectural moment in the growth of Santa Fe. So that and the simplicity, the use of the territorial style windows led me to believe that I would like to consider it to be a contributing building.
Okay. Board members, any clarification questions for a moment? Are the applicants wishing to speak on this case?
Will you both be speaking? Okay, I'll go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Ann Mace Cooney, 1A Camino Pequeño, Santa Fe.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you agree with staff's recommendation?
I do not. I think there's a pretty big difference between the Hickey, which was written by John Murphy, who's done, I think he said 200 of these. So, I mean, I love the house, I love the location, but the characteristics of it, I think the idea that it's a snapshot in time is mostly based on the cantilevered front, which my understanding is that that is not allowed now and would not have been allowed in 1973 either. And there are replacement windows, and we are lucky enough to have the 1973 plans. If you look at the front facade, there's supposed to be a quite lovely kind of, metal overhang over the door. And instead it got this kind of odd cantilevered, unsupported front. In addition, Ramon showed the window that was clearly replaced in the bathroom, which has a lot of mold inside, and that's why. On the east facade, which Ramon is also recommending be considered primary, the windows that are there, the fourplex, do not match the original plans either. So, that's why I don't agree.
And what would be your preference?
I mean, we will accept whatever you say, of course, but I'm just not sure it rises to the level of being historic. And it's also disconnected from its primary house.
Okay, board members, questions for the applicant, discussion? We'll take it to public comment in a second. Both on this case, previous case, some of the other cases that we've kind of argued about a little bit more recently, I'm dismayed by the idea that, just because something meets a 50-year mark, that we would designate it as contributing to the downtown and East Side Historic District, or whatever district that we're talking about, because that's fundamental to what the status designation is, right? It's the district that is a recognized historic resource. And so the building's contribution to a streetscape, to the district, it's a pity that we don't have the National Register description of what period of significance or the reason of significance is for any particular district in our code. But that's really what underpins a lot of the historic assessments that we're doing here. And so it's not to dismiss a building because it's old, but it's to determine whether a building is actually contributing to the district because it is part of its period of significance, or it's a comment on its periods of significance, or it somehow changes the district in an important historic way. Just because something is old, just because a property has a history, just because a property is cute and we like it, doesn't necessarily mean that we have to status it as designating. That's my take on this. The board members may have different opinions and perspectives, but this is, in my view, not a house that necessarily carries the character of the district. Member Aguilar-Medrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. We've also had conversations about how it's difficult hearing these cases separate from the design, but I'm going to ask a somewhat design-related question. One of the things you mentioned is that this house, which used to be a guest house, feels divorced from the primary. So I'm just wondering, is your hope moving forward to make it more in harmony with what once was the primary house, or because now it's a separated parcel, will the renovation have it stand on its own and separate from that house?
We would like it to make it look more like the 1973 plans, which I think were more beautiful, more appealing than what actually got constructed. So in terms of, I think you're asking about number 1, Camino Pequeño. I thought that house was a lot older. It turns out it was just built maybe in the 60s. So, and it's kind of difficult to see, so I haven't really, thought in my mind, I want to make it look like that.
Mhm.
It's more, there were some pretty nice ideas in those 1973 plans that just did not get executed. And it'd be nice to bring those out. So obviously we want to make it nicer than it is.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Member Benvenu.
To you, Chair Guida. Yeah, so just on the general concept of what we're trying to designate here, I thought it was striking as well that the plans themselves are much more attractive than the actual houses. And more importantly, the plans look like they are consistent with the ordinance, whereas the house is not with its cantilevers. And that, which are very dominating design features on this very small house. And which would be protected if it were designated as contributing. And I think that that would be a mistake, number one, just from a design perspective, because I don't think it was consistent with the original design. But more importantly, we'd run into conflicts with our ordinance, because this was probably constructed that way, potentially without permission. But regardless of whether permission was given, it's non-conforming to the ordinance, because those are definitely two very prominent cantilevers. And so for us to allow those to continue to exist, which would be the case if this was contributing, we would have to find that they have special historic or architectural significance. Otherwise, the only modification that can be made to the house is to get rid of those non-conforming features and make it conform to the ordinance, which, would be a backwards way of getting to where you're trying to go. Given that this house is almost exactly 50 years, barely within the term of historic significance, it's an extremely modest house. It's non-conforming. I don't see it as contributing personally. We don't have a period. I appreciate Member Guida's comments about period of significance, but we don't have that in our code, as we all know. What we do have is whether specific structure contributes to the historic and architectural and aesthetic context of the streetscape in the district. I don't think this particular structure does that. So all that said, however, I do want to commend staff's zealousness in looking into this as a potential contributing structure, and I appreciate the reasoning that made you reach that conclusion. The idea that this is a modernist structure, which is unusual and maybe speaks to a specific moment in time, but for the reasons I've just articulated, I think it's contributing. Thank you.
We'll take it to public comment. Any members of the public in the room wishing to speak on this case?
Swear you in? Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And can you please state your name and address for the record?
Elizabeth West, 318 Santa Street, Santa Fe. I love that this has come up. I wasn't expecting, anyway, I have to agree with what I sense is happening here. And at the same time, tremendously appreciate what staff has done. So it's a delicious conundrum. But in this case, I think that thing hanging over the entranceway that was permitted is so obtrusive. We have an opportunity here to do the right thing by not calling it contributing. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Anyone online wishing to speak? Okay, thank you, Heather. Back to the board, perhaps for a motion. Member Beachhead.
Yeah, I'll try to do better this time. First of all, I just have to thank the applicant for having the HICP completed. That's really helpful to us, and that I think the board has a great deal of respect for John Murphy's work. So thank you for that. And I think it's helpful, especially on this street, which is so lovely, like any house on that gorgeous street would warrant a second look, so. In case number 2023-007399 HDRB, 1A, Camino Pequeño, I move to designate the status as non-contributing, consistent with the HICP report in the package.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bichai,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next case is Lanny's. This is 826 Camino del Poniente. Is your applicant in the room?
Yes, he is. Evening Chair and Board members, this is case number 2023-7468 HDRB for 826 Camino del Poniente for a status review. 826 Camino del Poniente is located on the south of the road, just west of the intersection where Acequia Madre, Camino del Monte Sol, and Camino del Poniente meet. The residence is a single-family residence listed as non-contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The structure is a territorial revival style residence and is a simple rectangle. The south was most likely historically an entrance. However, with the enclosure of the porch, the main entrances are now to the north and the east. According to the 1991 Historic Building Inventory Form, the structure is believed to have been built in the 1930s. However, it first appeared in the city directory in 1951. It was originally a guest house for the property located at 828 Camino del Poniente and was owned by the author Elizabeth Duff. As an aside, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Ms. Duff, she was an American painter, teacher, playwright, and children's book writer. She contributed to the development of Native American easel painting in the 1920s and 1930s. She was a children's book author who wrote predominantly using Native American folklore and themes. She also wrote non-children's books and periodical articles with Native American, Hispanic, and New Mexico subjects. She wrote a total of 65 works in 118 publications. There is some evidence that the residence was used as a school sometime prior to 1991. The north and east elevation architecture is simple and unchanged. The garage was constructed on the north and west elevations sometime prior to the 1983 survey, though the date of construction has not been confirmed. Since the 1991 survey and prior to the 2000 case, the screened porch on the south elevation was enclosed. No historic case or permit was found for this enclosure of the porch. The staff wrote previously that they believed that the north elevation simplicity and original window and door configuration exemplify the building's architecture. The property owner started a case, H00-030 in 2000 to request a status review and some remodel, including additions. This case was postponed from March 2000 and never came back to the HDRB for the status review. However, staff did write a report in 2000 that shows that they felt the structure should be listed as a contributing structure to the downtown and east side district and recommended the north and east facades as primary, noting a portal had been enclosed on the south elevation. And given that the south elevation porch was enclosed and the garage was added to the west elevation, neither was historic. So staff agrees with these elevations should not be considered primary. Because the previous case was never acted on by the HDRB, the applicant now requests a status review with primary facade designation if applicable at this time. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be designated as contributing, citing that the structure is a prime example of territorial revival style and recommends the north and east facades as primary citing that both facades are simple and unchanged since the structure was constructed per section 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. And this is a facade map for your convenience.
Thank you, Lanny. Board members, any clarification questions for Lanny? May we have the applicant come forward? Hello again, Richard.
Hello. Again. I agree that this house should be contributing. However, I have two comments regarding the staff's recommended primary facades. The facades may be simple, but they are not unchanged. The report says that the facades are simple and unchanged. The north facade, the facade that faces the street, has had the windows in it replaced at least twice, and they should be replaced again because they're unattractive windows that are in that facade. And so that may be a factor when primary facades are designated. The east facade, the one that is perpendicular to the street, this facade should not be primary at all. And I'll tell you why. First of all, the front door is on that facade, and the front door is unprotected, and it should have an entry portal amended to that side. This building also has the east side of the lot as the only place where there is a possibility that some changes and additions can be made. The north facade is, I think, is the primary facade. That's the street facade. The west side of the building, where the garage is on the property line, and on the setback line. The south side of the building, the enclosed, what they call the enclosed porch, is also on the property line. But most importantly, the east facade, which now contains the front door to the house, has been changed significantly. I want to show you a couple of drawings. Okay, yes, all right, let me try this. The big rectangle that you see on the front of the building was never built. This is from the last motion before this board in 2000. And the window and door on the east, this is the east. And as you can see, the first one is labeled door, and the second one is labeled window. And it makes sense because the door coming in behind the fireplace in that little narrow spot sort of makes sense. The way the facade is right now, this is showing my drawing. That door has been changed into a window. That window is now in a closet, which is very strange to have a window in a closet because it was perhaps the old entryway that was enclosed. And then where it was labeled window, that's now a door, that's now the front door. So that facade has been changed significantly in the recent past, since 2000 until today. And so I would propose that only the north elevation, which fronts on the street, be the primary facade, and that also be, the windows not be part of that designation. Thank you.
Richard, a clarification question. Do you suspect that what's a closet now, this long closet with the window in it, is maybe once a portal?
It may have been. It's hard to tell where the front door, because there's a front door facing the street that opens into the kitchen right now, and nobody ever uses. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what's the closet door that's nearest to the fireplace might have actually been where the front door was at one time.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Thank you. Board members, any questions for Richard? Okay, we will take it to the public for comment. Anyone in the room wishing to speak on this case? Anyone online wishing to speak on this case?
Lawrence Colton, you may unmute and please state your name and address for the record and be sworn. I see the square lighting up when you're speaking, but we do not hear you. Mr. Colton, we do not hear you.
Larry Colton is one of the owners of this house.
And unfortunately, still cannot hear Mr. Colton. If you're using headphones or something like that, you may want to try to just use your speakers. Mr. Colton, I can see the microphone moving. I assume that you're talking. I cannot hear you.
On Mr. Colton's behalf, I know that he wants to express his the beauty of this house and his intention to enhance that beauty and not to distract in any way from the historic designation of this house, and to be a contribution to the streetscape as well.
Member Aguilar-Medrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Richard, can you provide some quick clarification? I think we know what's going on, but on the 1991 building inventory, there's a photo with a portal and it's labeled number 2 east elevation. Is it really the south elevation? I only bring it up because Chair Guida had just asked about if you thought there may have been a portal at one point.
I don't have that photograph. Is that the one with the pieces of metal railing on the facade, leaning against the facade?
No.
The photographs that show the pieces of metal railing against the facade are the east elevation, and it shows the window where the door is now, and a door where the window is now.
Okay, yeah.
You can see that on the photographs, but it's the one with the metal railing leaning against the house. That's the east.
Okay, no, this photo shows a portal with a large shade tree and 3 columns. But it's labeled east elevation for some reason, and I don't think it is.
No, it may be, so the portal that was enclosed in the back, see how they show an enclosed porch along the back? The end of it is near the east facade, and so that may be why they labeled that east facade. Maybe it's showing that portal in the back.
Thanks, Richard.
Heather, anyone else online wishing to speak?
Dr. Guida, no. Mr. Colton, did you want to try to unmute again to see if you could speak?
Working.
I can barely hear you.
Sounds like the teacher in Peanuts, but very low. I'm going to bring it back to the board for any other discussion, perhaps a motion. We did. You want to make a motion?
Motion. Let's see, once again, I find myself persuaded by Mr. Martinez tonight. On the primary elevations, generally speaking, even though our code does not spell this out, I think that the concept of a primary elevation facade, meaning face, implies the public facing elevation. I don't think that's necessarily always the true in every case that comes before us. I also don't think that's necessarily the only facade that can be designated. I think depending on the circumstances, more than that facade can be designated as primary. In this particular case, though, I'm persuaded that it's really the public-facing facade that is the primary facade. And with that, let's see if I can find the case number, 2023-007468 HDRB 826, Camino del Poniente. I move that the historic status be designated as contributing and the primary facade be designated as the north facade, I believe, with excluding the non-historic windows.
We have a second.
Aguilar Madrano will second. Do we want to also exclude the north facade of the 1980s garage addition?
Yes, if that's not already clear, I think that would definitely not be primary. Thank you.
Is that a second?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Aguilar Madrano.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next case is 912 Old Santa Fe Trail. This is Ramon's case. And is the applicant for this case present? Hi, Sunil. Come on down, Ramon.
Thank you. This is 912 Old Santa Fe Trail. It's located just to the south side of the street and just west of Amelia White Park. The property here is outlined in red. This is the existing site plan, which I gleaned from the 2002 HIGB. As you can see, the form of the building is a very rectangular form. This is the north or the front elevation, camera facing south. 912 is a single-family residence which straddles the downtown and east side and historic review district. So the district's kind of cut right through the middle of it. The architectural style is mid-modern with an estimated construction date of the late 1950s. Documental research shows no significant improvements or alterations. Now the applicant requests a status review and primary facades to inform future renovations. This is let's go back, portion of the north, and you get a view of the west elevations. One of the significant features of this single-family residence is those overhanging eaves, characteristic of mid-modern style. The south elevation with the camera facing north. And a portion of the east elevation and a portion of the west elevation. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure remain as non-contributing for a 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. With that, I'll take any questions.
Board members, any questions for Ramon? Would the applicant in this case like to speak?
Go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sunil, last name Sakalkar, 722 Bildersleeve Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 875.
Hi, Sunil.
Hello. I agree with Ramon's assessment of the structure. The overhangs on this house have been intriguing, and whatever renovations that we are proposing, we are like to honor those, some of the characteristics that we see. But having the designation as non-contributing helps us in freeing some of the additions that we are looking at. For mostly, this house has not been updated, and we are looking at replacing all the windows and doors with the more energy efficient doors, and windows in the same opening sizes, and enclosing some outdoor spaces for more occupational areas like laundry and office. So having it non-contributed, contributing structure helps us with those remodel and additions.
Neil, is the appearance of the property largely as it was when it was built?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? No. And then we'll go to public comment. Anyone in the room? Anyone online? So, Ramon, just a question. You know, here we have a property that is more than 50 years old, has a high degree of integrity, and of, as you put it, mid-century style. Is there a reason why you're recommending non-contributing?
I think that for a couple of reasons. One, it really doesn't have any street presence on Old Santa Fe Trail. The other is
It's not publicly visible?
hardly.
Okay.
The amount of vegetation made getting good photographs of the facades difficult. The other reason is, aside from the brick chimney and this articulation of the entry porch itself, the building is basically unarticulated and, in my opinion, indistinctive as it's just a block.
A lot of our brown stucco boxes are just a block, though.
Yes, Chairman Guido, that because of another factor is because it straddles the downtown and east side historic district, it goes with that more restrictive code requirements for downtown east side. And I don't think it meets the characteristics of that portion of their code for downtown east side.
Right. So the provocation I would make on this case, and this is in light of the discussion that we've had this evening, and probably in cases in the past as well. You know, we're talking, statusing is not the style guidelines, right? The style guidelines were something that the ordinance laid out in the late 50s, and that was the core of the ordinance was a series of style recommendations and guidance. The preservation part that we're talking about now, status, primary facades, what's contributing or not to a district, that is all an overlay on an ordinance that came after the designation of the historic district. In general, we're allowed to oversee, instead of the state, the historic status of these buildings. And as confusing as it is in the code, the issue is, you know, some of the considerations are age of the property, and then its contribution to the district, which is what the district is as a historic entity is ill-defined, but we know it's in the National Register nomination. So I make this point saying, you know, like, well, this is a building that also has integrity, that, you know, that is of its place in time, that meets the rules of that period. And we could have a discussion about whether or not 1950s architecture is relevant or not to the downtown and east side historic district, to that development of that portion of the city. We know that the downtown and east side historic district is not uniform. We had a robust discussion here about the Capitol District, right? And those buildings having a different feel than, you know, buildings that are obviously quite much older. So I'm advocating for, you know, for a more thoughtful approach to the historic dimension of it. The style thing to me, when we're talking about historic status, is secondary. Some of the things that we status, as Member Benvenu pointed out, may be non-conforming, but they may be important to a particular period in time. And I think in looking at these cases, I think those considerations need to be made up front. You know, there is the component of ability to develop and make changes that applicants have been speaking to tonight, and that is a consideration part of this. But the primary thing really, to me, is this preservation concern. What are we trying to achieve by statusing buildings in the district, and not? And I guess that's the question I'll ask to the board in terms of their take on this property. And
Chair Guido, can I respond?
Sure, please.
And I understand one of the points you're making as to style and its relation to the historic districts. I think I could have articulated better that I didn't find this a particularly good example of mid-modernism. The way the building is sited takes no advantage of the sides. There's, you know, no views to the mountains. The garages face east. And I've seen excellent examples of mid-modernism, even here in Santa Fe, that I think could reach a contributing status. But this particular one, I don't think is a very articulated good example of that style. I think that the form and the siding could have been more thoughtfully executed.
Okay. Board members? Heather, did you?
Chair Guido, I would just like to put on notice to the applicant that if this building were designated as non-contributing and a remodel was requested that would involve any changes to the roof, that eave would have to be removed because it does not comply with the downtown site.
Thank you, Heather. That's an important consideration. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Chair Guido. I'll go ahead and make a motion. You're ready for that?
We've had public comment. Yep.
Yep.
The applicant spoke, so I think we're ready.
I don't want to jump the gun if there was any further discussion either on the part of the board. Okay. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Ramon. I think that all the points are well taken, that a mid-century modern building is not necessarily non-contributing. As Member Guida pointed out, even if it is non-conforming, we do take into consideration non-conforming buildings when they either have independent historic or architectural interests, like a cathedral, for example, or when they contribute in their own right to some aspect of the history of that particular district. And a mid-century modern building could do that if it was either a really extraordinary example of the form, or it was part of a larger grouping of buildings that have some significant impact on the character of the district, which is how we define contributing. But for the reasons that Ramon put forward, I agree that this particular case, this is not a contributing building. So in case number 2023-007402, HDRB 912 Old Santa Fe Trail, I would move that we adopt the recommendation of staff, and based on the reasoning set forth by staff, that the historic status be designated as non-contributing.
We have a second.
Aguilar Medrano will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Beechey?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Valdo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Ramon, the next case is yours. This is 771 West Manhattan Avenue. Is your applicant in the room?
Is 3%. Robin, 505.
Okay, so in the interest of time, maybe the board can provide a motion to move case number 6, 771 West Manhattan Avenue, to the end of the agenda, given that the applicant is not present.
Aguilar Medrano so moves.
Second, please.
Beechey, second.
Roll call vote.
Member Bienvenue? Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Valdo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Beechey?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
You, case, the 7th one, 412 Camino Cabra. Paul, this is your case. I see John Dick is in the room. Let's proceed.
Mayor Guida, members of the board, good evening. This is case number 2023-007474, HDRB 412 Camino Cabra. 412 Camino Cabra is a single-family residence listed as non-contributing to the downtown and Eastside Historic District. The structure was built in 1950 on a 0.147 acre lot and totaled 734 square feet. The structure was built in a modest Santa Fe vernacular style with an L-shaped form constructed out of masonry block, middle casement windows, and a wooden flat roof. A portal wraps around the northeastern facade comprised of wooden viga beams and corbels. Here's a photo of a 1948 aerial photograph courtesy of Mr. Murphy, showing the property not constructed as of yet. In 1951, we have an aerial photograph showing that there's an L-shaped structure built there courtesy by Mr. Murphy. We have a 1960 aerial photograph showing the L-shaped structure as this property in this area is starting to be developed. Here we have a 1978 aerial photograph showing the structure staying relatively the same way it was constructed. The structure has gone alterations post 1978, which includes the addition of a portal on the east elevation and a closet addition on the west elevation, but the core of the structure remains intact. Here's an indication of the site plan showing the portal on the northeastern facade. The north and east elevations, and the south and west elevations, and the facade diagram. So the structure and a previous older adjacent structure, which has since been demolished, was constructed by the Lucrecio Roybal family. One of the sons, Frank Roybal, resided on the property after returning from World War II and is the one that constructed the residence. Frank worked for Allen Stamp's Home Construction Company. Staff recommends a contributing status due to the relatively minor changes to the building over time. Staff further recommends designating the east elevation, including facade 4, excluding the portal, as well as the orphan wall between the subject building and the adjacent building to the west that hints to the history that once housed, another house existed on the site. Staff would also like to recommend the southern facade as well, and indicated in number 5 as contributing as a primary facade. A previous historical properties inventory form was completed in 1984. The structure was given non-contributing status because it did not meet the 50-year historic threshold. The structure is now 73 years old and meets the historic threshold to be designated as contributing to the downtown and Eastside Historic District. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be upgraded to contributing with the east and south facades designated as number 4, 5, and the southwestern wall designated as 9 in the facade diagram as primary per 14-5.2 C designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Just to be clear, your recommendation differs from John Murphy's, is that correct?
That's correct.
You recommended only the projecting portion of the east facade?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Board members, questions for Paul? Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Hi, Paul. So I know you are excluding the portal on the east facade. The blue fence that surrounds it is interesting. Do you think, is there any way that even though you're not recommending that be included in the facade, that it could be called out as non-conforming? I don't know that it technically is non-conforming, but can you see, do you know what I mean?
Chair Guido, Member Aguilar Medrano, you're talking about on the portal?
Yeah, on the east facade, it looked like there was a portal at one point that at one point got enclosed by the blue wooden fence to create a sitting area. Yeah.
Yes.
And attached to the portal. Do you think that could be considered non-conforming in our code? That it could be noted in a motion, or no?
Staff would have to defer to Heather on this question. I'm sorry. Heather, could you?
Chair Guida, Member Aguilar Medrano, I was just thinking about this. It does comply with zoning regulations with reference to fencing. So as to non-conforming to our ordinance, we do permit fences and walls. And when it is this low, I don't know that we can argue that it would be non-conforming in those cases, but is there something else that maybe?
No, I don't think I'd seen that treatment before of a fence being built between columns of a portal, so I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Speaking of designation of not attractive. Any other clarifications, questions for Paul from the board? Member Beachhead.
Thank you, Chair Guida. So Paul, facade number 9 is the wall, which is described in the HICP as a possible remnant of a former building. Is that correct?
Chair Guida, Member Bescheid, that is correct.
Right. So that seems a little unusual to designate a building remnant as contributing. It's neither a wall nor part of the structure that we're considering. It's definitely interesting. I just might disagree that we would designate that as something that has to be preserved. Just wanted to confirm that that's what it was. Thank you.
Thank you.
May we hear from the applicant?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
John Dick, 112 Camino Escondido. 2.
Hi, John.
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with staff's recommendation?
I don't. I agree with John Murphy's HICP report that indicates that the east facade be primary. The south facade is on a very narrow street, half of which is concealed by a garden wall. So I'm in a very kind of modest elevation of 2 small windows and a blank wall for the most part. So I would, and as a footnote, I don't mean to jump ahead here, but were those 2 facades being considered primary, there's no way that anyone can really make any additions or modifications to the house to make it a more livable structure. The one thing on the HICP and a minor point that is incorrect, it indicated it's a 2-bedroom house. It's a 1-bedroom house, one small bedroom. The closet is what was added in the southwest corner. Very small living room, no dining room, kitchen, and a small bathroom. So the owners of the property were giving some consideration to try to do an addition on the west side, which would be possible if only the east elevation were primary. If it was the south elevation, it's my understanding by code, we would have to be set back 20 feet from that wall. So that really kind of squeezes us down to the northwest corner of, and with 5-foot setbacks, there's really wouldn't be any room to do anything in the way of an addition or improvement to the property. And were that the case, the owners, I think, would just sell it. They wouldn't be able to occupy the space. They are very comfortable with the small, intimate character of the house, but they'd like to have, something in the way of a possible dining room and a decent-sized bathroom.
So you agree that John Murphy, the recommendation of this kind of east projecting facade is captures the character defining elements of the house?
Yes, yeah, I do. And always thought so even before I came on the project. I live nearby and have driven by many times. So that's the portion of the house that is dominant and sticks out.
And is that a screen that we see in the historic photograph?
Yes, it appears to be a screen of some sort over that window.
Cool. Board members, any question for the applicant? If there's any member of the public that wishes to speak right now, please come on down and be sworn in.
I'll go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John LaCava. I live next door at 1163 Camino Santa Casa. And what I understand the way things are going, this is my first experience with the board. It seems that there doesn't really seem to be a question that it's going to be designated contributing, it's just arguing about the facade. Just with respect to the contributing, the streetscape, this is a very prominent, it's right on the corner, right from the Cristo Rey Church, so you definitely see it. It's not, so I agree that, you know, the character and which facade, I don't necessarily have a professional opinion on that. My concern was really about the setback on the wall. My understanding was that I just have a concern that if there is an addition, that if it's within 5 feet of my wall, as I said, I think if that's going to be the rear, are you following me? If the front is facing Camino Cabra, right, the east side, and the west side where my house is, my understanding, if that's the rear, there'd be a 15-foot setback. I'm not sure. That's my understanding. And I saw some plans that called for 5-foot setback, which would be too close, I feel, to my wall, especially if they want to have a dining room, because I'm 5 feet and just 10 feet away. So that's really my self-interest and concern, is that we not overbuild on that lot. They could do what they want as long as they, in my opinion, disrespect all the setbacks.
Thank you. John, do you have an indication of what the west side yard setback is going to be?
My understanding is it's a 5-foot setback, but I could be wrong. And one footnote is that the east facade of the neighbor's property is entirely blank and has no windows at all on it. So.
Thank you. Back to the, anybody online wishing to speak? Thank you, Heather. Board members, further discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion, Chair Guida.
Thank you.
In case 2023-007474 HDRB at 412 Camino Cabra, I move to designate the property as contributing, with the primary facade designated as the east elevation projection at the living room, consistent with the HICP report.
Do we have a second?
Neither seconds.
You roll call vote, please.
Excuse me, Chair Quick,
Yes.
just point of clarification. Is that designated as number 4 diagram that was prepared? I just want to make sure I understand.
Chair Guida, member Bienvenue, that's correct.
Thank you for clarifying. Any other changes to the motion?
We'll just add the, for clarification, facade number 4 on the facade map.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo, Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to number 12. This is 1666.5 Cerro Gordo Road. Lanny, this is your case. Are your applicants present?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
I am not that tall. Good evening, Chair and board members. This is case 2023-7360 HDRB for 1666.5 Cerro Gordo Road, requesting additions and a freestanding carport with 2 exceptions.
Chair Guida?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll recuse from this case, but I'll stay in the room.
Okay, wonderful. Lanny, please proceed.
The property is on the south side of Cerro Gordo Road and east of Paseo de Florencio. I don't know how you pronounce it. The property sits below the road and the residential buildings are not visible from the road. The property at 1666.5 Cerro Gordo Road is a single-family residence with 3 structures. 2 are listed as contributing and 1 as non-contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The northern structure is a contributing garage with a stone base and is not a part of this application. Further down the hill to the south are the 2 residential structures. The eastern structure, which will be referred to as Building A, is non-contributing and sits further south than the western structure. The western structure, which will be referred to as Building B, is a contributing structure with the northern facade of the original structure designated as primary. The primary facade is marked in red here. When viewed from Cerro Gordo Road, the residential structures are not visible. Once on the driveway, the contributing residential structure is visible. The primary facade is at the center of the lot and is the full facade of the original structure. The structure to the right sits 10 feet back and 10 feet to the west of the primary facade. Building A is a separate structure that is connected by a portal that was constructed in 1999. Building A was listed as contributing until 1999, when under case H 99004, its status was downgraded to non-contributing. This case approved the construction of a portal to connect the Building A's northern facade to the contributing Building B's structure's east facade, altering the picture window on Building A to be replaced with French doors, removal of the frame protruding from around the front door of the building, and then on Building B, alter the window opening to install French doors. In 2001, under case H0167, a 485 square foot addition in Spanish Pueblo Revival style was allowed to be constructed on the western elevation of the Building B. The HDRB did require a 10-foot setback and a 10-foot separation from the primary northern facade, which created the U shape of the structure. Now the applicant proposes the following exterior alterations. They would like to demolish the 1999 portal on the eastern elevation of the contributing structure in order to construct an addition with portal. The addition will be a 450 square foot addition on the eastern elevation of the contributing structure to connect to the northern elevation of the non-contributing structure. This will be in the location of the existing portal. 2 exceptions are requested for this addition. That would be to exceed the 50% of the historic footprint per section 14-5.2 D2D and to construct an addition within 10 feet of the primary facade per section 14-5.2 D2D. They would like to construct a 150 square foot portal addition on the eastern elevation of the new addition and the northern elevation of the non-contributing structure, and then construct a freestanding 400 square foot carport on the northeastern portion of the property. Just as a summary of the square footage, the existing contributing structure is 460 square feet. 50% of that contributing structure is 230 square feet. If they were to construct this addition and portal, the total non-contributing additions will be a total of 1,950 square feet. The applicant has requested 2 exceptions to exceed the 50% historic footprint and to construct within 10 feet of the primary facade. The existing portal is located within the 10 feet from the primary facade. It's like 7.5 feet, and the proposed addition will be in the same location. The applicant did respond to the exception criteria for the exception. However, staff did not find that the exception criteria were met as other design options were not discussed. The applicant also responded to the exception criteria to exceed the 50% footprint rule. Again, staff did not find the exception were met because no other design options were discussed. Staff does not find that all the exception criteria have been met, but the board may find that they have upon further testimony. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the application as it complies with 14-5.2D, general design standards for all H districts, and 14-5.2E for downtown and east side historic district. I would like to note that the applicant provided us with a rebuttal in writing to my staff report. And I put these in front of you earlier today.
Thank you, Lanny. So just a few clarification questions. And thank you for the very clear presentation and the calculations. So two exception criteria, or two exceptions are being requested, one to the square footage, the other to the setback rule. On the setback rule, it's 10 feet from a primary facade. The applicant is proposing still a setback, still differentiating the proposed addition, but instead of 10 feet, it's 7.5 or 7'4" or something like that.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then the other issue is the exceeding the 50% of the contributing structure. The existing west elevation, or sorry, the existing west addition to the contributing structure, that exceeded 50%.
Yes, and then the portal, I exceeded it again.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for clarifying. Board members, other clarifications, questions for Lanny before we move to the applicant? Being none, let's move to the applicant. Have them sworn in if they wish to speak.
I'll swear both. Are you both going to speak? Okay, I'll swear both of you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. And if you speak, please state your name and address for the record.
Margaret Denny, 755.
Ms. Denny, get right up on that microphone, please.
Margaret Denny, 755 Acequia Madre, Santa Fe.
Thank you.
Ken Payson, 755 Acequia Madre, Santa Fe. We're the architects.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you have to tell us?
Well, we have written down what we plan to say. We can just read from what we've said, what Lonnie said in front of you.
I mean, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just, you know, we have your text. It's quite long. Give us the executive summary.
Okay. Well, we originally were advised by staff that if we asked to downgrade to non-contributing status, this project would be fine. And then we were further advised that after discussion, you know, with her colleagues, that it was going to be a better idea to try to go for exceptions. Because what she stated was that the board and the staff don't like to lose a contributing structure. And in our view, the primary facade is what remains of that contributing structure based on previously approved additions, west and east. And that's still not going to be touched. So it's kind of, you know, we went ahead and applied for or advised the owner based on Lonnie's suggestions to go ahead and apply for the exceptions, which she was unconvinced by our arguments. So we came back with what we consider is the reasonableness of this addition for this particular property. The lot coverage is well within the normal for that neighborhood. We kind of took 3 properties east and 3 properties west as kind of the calculations. We used the county assessor's map to figure out exactly what the square footages were and lot coverages. And they're well within that and quite a bit less than the average size house if we do this addition. And the fundamental thing is these owners have had this house for about over 25 years. And have, you know, as affordability allowed, they were able to put that portal on so they could at least be under roof to connect the 2 parts of the house. And, you know, they plan to live out age in place, as we call it, in the house. And it really has no interior connection, and it has no real living room. I mean, there's a home office that is in the original part of the house that is considered contributing. But there's no real decent sized room for them to just put a, couple of sofas and chairs and, and pass through from one part of the house to the other. So this long screed that we presented to you folks for this meeting basically is to argue that case. That it, it would be, these folks have lived in the neighborhood for a long time, and it's a, relatively large lot, 13,000 plus square feet, but most of the lot, many of them on that little stretch of Cerro Gordo along the river, just, like those old strips that were, so it's not suitable to add elsewhere, and adding elsewhere on the property would not enable them to have one house. It would still have these two separate structures. You want to add something?
I just wanted to add another point that it seemed to us when we were initially thinking of trying to have the status taken down to, from contributing to non-contributing, that based on additions that have already been made with board approval, that in effect had sort of already happened. I mean, it's already well over 50% additions on either side of the house. The existing portal, we're looking to match that setback, which was 7.7 feet 3 inches with the new addition. That's, that all of these are permitted, and the permitted additions, everything was done according to code and staff. So in a sense, it seems that if we were wanting to argue for a change in status, that has in effect already occurred based on the changes that have been made to the house. Another thing, but you were out there today, I assume, and the fact that the buildings are because of the wall that is separating the building B from the rest of the property, it's almost imperceptible that they're even connected. I don't know whether that's something you consider or not, but that's very much a part of the experience of that property. So anyway, I wanted to mention that in addition to everything else, and actually get your take on whether you think that because of the changes that have already been made to that contributing structure B, whether it would make sense to try to have the status changed and then proceed from that point of view. Thank you.
Thanks. It's an interesting question. I mean, one would hope that that alterations to a property that are approved by this board and compliant with the code, even with exceptions, that they would not, that those approved additions, if executed correctly, would not diminish the status of the property, right? And I'm not saying that always happens, but I think an operating assumption is that when we approve an addition and do so, following the rules and following whatever design exceptions we may grant, the intent is for that addition not to ruin status of, or downgrade the status of the property. That would have been the case for the West Addition when it was done, and that would be the hope for the approval if we so approve this tonight.
But that's also the case for the portal. So on both the east and west sides, there are additions which are exceeding the stated maximum for a contributing structure.
Right, but even there, if an exception is granted for exceeding the limit, the board would be doing so in hopes of not diminishing status of the property. Yes.
Sure. I'd like to put the picture up again. The lower photograph, where you can see, in place of the portal where the arrow that says building A, would be the addition that is proposed. And the primary facade, you know, I would say remains unmolested, you know, by that. It would be just as you see it here with a different building on the left.
Thank you. I'm sure the board members have questions. Member Aguilar Madrona.
Thank you, Chair Guida. First, just a comment, you know, our application guidelines ask that floor plans be submitted one on top of the other, just because it makes it a lot easier for us to flip back and forth. So in the future, if you could just do that, please. But for right now, I just have a question. Did you guys consider the option of reducing the size of the living room by roughly 3 feet? That way you would only have to seek one exception and you wouldn't have to ask for the second one, which states you have to be no closer than 10 feet from a primary facade.
The main reason for that was because if we were to go 10 feet back, we would have to change the openings, the French doors. That's right, sort of, it overlaps with that. And just as a, you know, making it simpler and less expensive, we just thought we would ask for that smaller.
Okay, that's the only question I have right now. Thank you.
Other board members? Member Beachhead.
Thank you, Chair Guida. I guess I would just say that you know, your assumption to add the addition at the current location of the portal 7 feet and some inches back, it's a very logical assumption. It seems like a logical accretion of the building that largely appears as one now with that connecting portal. So I did have the same thought as Member Aguilar Madrona, like why don't we just sort of limit the number of exceptions? But the fact that you were granted, or the project was granted an exception before, you know, leads me to kind of respect that decision as appropriate at the time, and why would we sort of roll back on that at this point? I think that at this point, that's probably the most sensitive solution for this project in terms of an addition, is to maintain what's been there for 23 years and continue along this path. I find the 50% footprint rule very confusing when it happens in gradual different applications. You know, you're not to exceed, the text of the code reads that you're not to exceed 50% of the existing footprint. So theoretically, if we kept granting exceptions, like this one house would take over the town or something, but I think that we've sort of like crossed that bridge as well, in terms of the additions already exceeding this requirement. The fact that you're not further affecting the primary facade, I think is a reasonable approach. And I guess I would be in favor of approving both exceptions on the rationale that you've shared with us in your letter.
Any other comments before we go to public comment? Okay, members of the public, anyone wishing to speak? Please come on down and be sworn in.
You affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Mary Ray Kate. I live at 1677 Cerro Gordo Road, which is on the other side of the road. I've lived there for almost over 40 years. And I would say that the improvements that were made by the current owners over 20 years ago were improvements to the appearance. The two original buildings that were considered contributory at that time were just little blocks. And the fact that the one that's still contributing is so small makes it almost impossible I don't think either of them were primary residences when they were built, of the two original buildings. And so I've looked at the plans, and I think it's going to really continue to improve the appearance of our neighborhood if you approve this request. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Heather.
Chair Guida, Thank you. With reference to the approval of the project back in 1999, I will note that the drawings called for a 10-foot setback at that. How it was built is something different, but the approval was for a 10-foot.
Thank you for that clarification. Just a couple comments on this, I think that the setback issue, the 10-foot rule, is actually the easier one to grant. I think I've heard from the applicants that there were different considerations. Well, if we follow the 10-foot rule and we run into that existing door, perhaps the proportions of that room and the portal are not as nice and not as congruent with the house. I think design options have been explored in that regard, and I think also the intent of the 10-foot setback rule is being acknowledged in the design, right? That we're differentiating an addition from a primary facade of a contributing building. The 50% rule is, again, back to this question of, are we talking about accounting or are we talking about qualitative aspects of the design and of the architecture and of the things that we're attempting to value in the districts and in the architecture. I think the 50% rule, I agree, it's always occurred to me as funny, you could keep on coming back for successive additions and satisfy the letter of the law. I think probably the intent is, does an addition overwhelm an existing contributing structure? And, in my mind, I don't think that, that may not be entirely up to a number, a square footage percentage, right? We often talk about the difference between objective height of buildings and a sense of scale. And I think that square footage is probably not the only metric. For the most part, the previous West Edition didn't overwhelm that building. And it's likely, from what I'm seeing here, that the proposed edition won't again overwhelm that contributing asset. I don't see a big difference between what we see now, the portal in front of building A, and what's being shown here in terms of degrading that building. I don't see that happening at all. I think what we have is a kind of visual improvement and a marked difference in the architecture of the two features.
May I comment on the
Sure.
50% rule? I think that it is what it is, but I do think it creates a much greater hardship when your original building is so tiny. I mean, if we were looking at a 1,500 square foot original house, and then you say, oh, well, you can add 750 feet, that's very, very different from, what we're looking at here when the original square footage is under 500 square feet. And I think that's something to consider also.
Thank you. Heather and Lanny, is the rule the 50% of the contributing structure or 50% of the existing building?
It's 50% of the historic building. So it's anything that's historic, and because all their additions have been since 1985.
Okay. Thank you. Right, restrictive. Okay, cool. We've had public comment. Anyone online wishing to speak? Okay.
Yes, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair. Back to the board for any further discussion or perhaps a motion.
I think it's important for me to read how the rule exactly reads. This is subsection B, subsection 2B. Additions are not permitted to the side of the existing footprint unless the addition shall not exceed 50% of the square footage of the existing footprint and shall not exceed 50% of the existing dimension. The extent architecturally practical new additions shall be attached to any existing non-contributing portion of structures instead of attaching them to the significant.
Thank you. Board members?
make a motion. In case number 20, sorry, 2023-007360 HDRB at 1666.5 Cerro Gordo Road. I move to approve the application, noting that the exception criteria for both exceptions have been met by the testimony, the written and spoken testimony by the applicants tonight. Noting in particular that the proposed addition matches the external dimensions of the existing portal, minimizing the impact of the increased space, which is already occupied by an open air portal. That the hardship criteria has been met in addressing a very limited, small, original historic space with a minimal connection that provides a livable space connecting the two buildings. I think also the hardship is that the property contains two small buildings, and that this connection is a reasonable way to respect what is the existing condition, and also without touching the primary facade. And then I would also just note that this does seem to be the least negative impact with respect to options available for increasing the size of the house. I lost my train of thought. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second to the motion?
Either seconds.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Baldo,
No.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachite,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Just a note to the applicant, because these are design exceptions and this board does not yet have a text amendment allowing us to rule on them, you're aware that this will go to City Council. Okay. Thank you. Good luck with your project. Okay, next case is Ramon's. This is 802 Don Cubero. Are your applicants in the room, Ramon? Okay, thank you.
This is case 2023-007473 HDRB. The image that you're looking at is the east elevation that was taken in 1985. Many of you board members will recall that this structure was brought before the board in September for a status review and primary facades. The result of that hearing was the east street-facing facade and the north, also a street-facing facade, and a portion of the original garage were considered primary, and the designation was retained as contributing. Seen here outlined in red, 802 Don Cabrera is located on the western edge of Don Gaspar Area Historic District, east of Don Diego, and at the intersection of West Buena Vista Street and Don Cabrera. I think I'll skip this description unless you would like me to go into it more. I'll go ahead and read it. Sitting on a corner lot, this structure was constructed in the 1920s. The hollow pentile house faces east into Don Cabrera with a modestly scaled porch. The mixed Spanish eclectic and Pueblo revival building encloses roughly 3,000 square feet, including the finished basement. Property has low street walls, a non-contributing carport, and a two-car garage that was built at the same time as the house. The house and the garage are designated as contributing. Following that September meeting, we also designated the site walls to the east and the north as contributing. In August 1982, historic building inventory form photographs, the circled windows represent several changes. The removal of the original wood multi-light casements and replacement with aluminum slider units. Alteration of rough window opening dimensions. Placement of new windows deeper into the wall with exaggerated reveals, increasing the size and bulk of the window sills. On the left, a photo of the east facade, camera facing northwest. On the right, the north corner facade, camera facing southwest. This is an image of the contributing garage. But that winged and step parapets are consistent with the main residence. Carport addition with the arch window openings to the left was added sometime maybe in the 90s. The applicant now proposes to replace the windows, the aluminum slider windows, with divided light windows. I'll show you each elevation. This is the east elevation with the existing above and the proposed below. The existing south elevation above and the proposed below. The existing west elevation above and the proposed below. The existing north elevation above and the proposed below. Staff does not recommend approval of the proposed project and finds that the application does not comply with Section 14-5.2D5A1, General Design Standards for all historic districts, and Section 14-5.2D5, Windows, Doors, and other architectural features. The windows in the 82 historic inventory form were original historic windows and show divided lights and windows. Can I answer any questions?
Ramon, what would it, in your view, what would it take for the application to satisfy the design standards?
I will let the applicant and her agent speak more directly to this because it's my understanding that they brought samples of the proposed windows. But what we like to see is divided lights with the exterior buttons. And what the window that is being proposed, these windows would be, or the divided buttons would be encapsulated between two thermal-pane glasses, which gives it a quite different look.
Is there a requirement is there a material requirement for the window?
I've seen this board pass windows that were not wood, but they had the divided lights on the outside. If that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Aguilar Madrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Ramon, I saw in the packet that you couldn't find a record of when the windows were replaced sometimes in the 90s. And that reminded me of our site visit. And I wanted to follow up with you about the vehicular and pedestrian gates. I see in this application that the owners are the same owners as in 2015 when that letter was written. And they said that that vehicular gate was going to be wood and metal. And I remember Bienvenue had asked to see if you guys could follow up and find a record of why it's solid metal in current condition. Were you able to look for that or find anything?
I did research for the permit for those metal gates and I was unable to find one.
Okay, so it's safe to presume that the gate was approved with a description of wood and metal, and then it was constructed of solid metal.
I hate to assume anything, but apparently it may be the case.
Okay, thank you for looking into that, Ramon.
Any other questions for Ramon? Let's move to the applicant. Please come down and be sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Sarah Flores Severs, 802 Don Cubero Avenue.
Good evening.
Good evening. Where do we begin? So it's been a long time coming, so thank you. It's been a year since this meeting, so I'm so excited to be here. The original request for the grids inside, I have to order 27 windows. That's a lot of windows. That's a lot of money. And so again, I was just trying to think of maintenance. That was one thing. I walk my dog frequently in the neighborhoods and I see what happens when you don't maintain. I'm trying to keep that because I am that corner house. I want it to look nice and be able to afford new windows and keep them present, nice for the neighborhood. And then one other thing too, walking through the neighborhood, I see a lot, and I do have slides if you like to see them or handouts. A lot of the houses actually do have the inserted grids, and it's hard to notice. You have to get really close. So again, I thought, if other houses have them, have maybe been approved, I would like to do that as well. So that's another reason for this request. And my other request is we had a newer Home Depot associate come and work with me, and he said he was familiar with working in the historic district. I think he was, but then of course, being my house, being the exception, being contributing, I didn't think he realized what that really entailed. And so at that point, those windows were already ordered. So these windows are now in storage, waiting. So that's another reason it would be wonderful if you could make this exception and approve the style of window, so I could actually get those windows installed before winter. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to wait another year because it's gonna take at least 4 months to get the other new windows. You can't install windows during the winter. That was another reason for this ask as well. The windows itself, they leak. Worrying about the interior, single pane, all the wind, cold, they're very inefficient. So just another reason I would love to finally get these new windows.
Board members, questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Chair Guida. Do you have any knowledge as to the removal of the original historic windows?
We bought the house with the sliders. That's how we purchased it. Yeah, they're pretty horrific.
And what about the metal gate, pedestrian gate, as well as the vehicular gate?
Sure. When we bought the house in 2008, we were not informed at the time that we were in this historic contributing district. We had dogs, and then with safety and privacy, we put those gates on the back end of the house. Again, that was just, I guess, our fault for not knowing, but again, we were not also told from the realtor, so that was lesson learned. And so that was done in 2008. And then the recent gate, we did a permit. It was kind of a two-part project when we divided. We got approval to knock out part of the wall to expand the driveway, and then we could only do part of that project. And then we followed up with the second half with doing the low wall to divide an actual front yard to the driveway, because at that time it was just open again. And again, the house unfortunately has been broken into almost 4 times. So again, safety, trying to deter anyone trying to get in. I know it's only a 3.5-foot wall, but still. And then we put the gate as well to keep the dogs in. And unfortunately, we just decided at the last minute to do the metal gate and not the metal wood. A lot of our neighbors have similar features, and we just thought it looked very aesthetically pleasing, so we just wanted to keep with what other neighbors had in the neighborhood as well.
Thank you. So Ramon, thank you, Member Aguilar Medrano, for bringing up the request that we had made at the prior meeting. It was actually a 2-part request. One is whether approval was given for the gates, and secondly, if not, what staff's position was on what should be done to enforce the ordinance.
I looked for a building permit and the specifications that would be attached to those gates, and I was unable to find any documentation for it.
Right. And so part 2 of the question was then what? So if the gates were not permitted and they're non-conforming, what is the appropriate remedy? Maybe this goes to Heather.
Yeah, I think this is a Heather question.
Guida, Member Bienvenu, it certainly is, if there was something that was added without permission, that a permit would be required or changed without permission. It may have to come back to the Historic Districts Review Board. And in this particular case, because it's so visible, it would need to first get approval by this board and then a permit to be issued.
Okay, thank you. So that's maybe not germane to what's before us today, but I would ask that that be followed up on. With respect to what is germane to today, it seems to me that when we had a case on Agua Fria where historic windows were replaced without the board's permission, we required that even though vinyl slider windows or maybe even divided light windows have been installed again without board permission or department permission, that the board required that those windows be removed and wooden true divided lights windows be reinstalled. You recall that?
I don't believe that was my case, but I do remember.
And what was I'm just looking through the ordinance right now, not finding what was the provision, Heather, that the board relied on for that judgment?
Chair Guida, member Bienvenue. So that section 14-5.2 D5, doors, windows, doors, and other architectural features, that if there are primary facades and non-historic changes, the only changes that may be made subsequently is to retain the historic character of that structure. And as we have photographic evidence, that would be the true divided light windows on those facades.
Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
And Heather, just a point of clarification on this, that requirement pertains to the primary facades only.
Chair Guida, yes, that's correct. The other type of window can be considered for the non-primary.
Okay, so even though we may not like vinyl windows, they could be installed on the non-primary facades. There's nothing in the district standards that would necessarily preclude that.
If that's the pleasure of the board.
Okay. And then just to understand the issue of the gate too, and the reason why I asked this is because it's clear to me that the house was designated as contributing prior to this owner taking it, prior to those aluminum windows being installed and all of that. So, I think an argument can be made for, turning or returning to the divided light style of windows. They wouldn't necessarily have to be painted wood exterior windows. They could be metal clad, but something more faithful to the original design, expressing a true divided light look on the outside of the building. I guess the same question would extend to the gate, Ramon. The statusing of the wall and the gate, those weren't contributing prior to this board's action in September. So,
I believe that's correct.
okay. And John, this is just trying to figure out where we can go here. That change, that was not yet a designated gate.
Right. Yeah, my view though would be that those gates are not harmonious with the district, regardless of whether or not there was a contributing wall that they were being attached.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicants before we go to public comment? Did you have something else?
Yes, I'm sorry. I actually.
Is this the windows? Sure. Do you have any images of the windows that you're? Okay.
Chair, if it pleases the board, the agent for Home Depot brought a sample of the type of windows that were purchased. If you would like to take a look at them.
All of the photos, again, within the historic district, are the ones with the inserted grids. I just wanted to, I'm a visual person, I thought that might help, and then also with the gates as well. The gate across the street from me on Sen and Don Cubeto is the one that we, wanted to follow suit.
Member Aguilar Madrona.
Thank you, Chair Guida, and thank you for the photos. I guess, I know this is not what we're hearing tonight, but I'm still a little confused on the vehicular gate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that you changed it because you didn't realize you were in the historic district. Is that right?
Well, and you're talking about the larger gate in the back of the house, correct?
I believe it's a north facade. It's the vehicular gate, so the much longer one that's at the driveway.
Yes, so that's the one that we installed in 2008, correct? We did not know that we were in the historic district or contributing if we were, I wouldn't even know if we were contributing at that time, to be honest.
Yes, the reason I'm confused is that the letter which describes the kind of gate you wanted to install where it stated wood and metal is made out to the historic board. So
What date was that?
it was in 2015.
No, because I think the gate was already in.
That's a letter in our packet, and I don't want to sidebar. But to Chair Guida's point, I do recall the case, member Bienvenu, that you're referring to. I don't think we'd have to require wood in this case, and I imagine that the wood are much more expensive. I would like to see true divided lights or simulated with muntins on the interior and exterior, but if it needed to be a different material to help save on costs, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Would you like to see a sample of the window? Would that be helpful at all?
I'll take it to public comment. Anyone in the room wishing to speak? Anyone online? Thank you, Heather. Back to the board on the issue of the windows.
Okay, thank you, Chair Reed. Let me get to the case number here. In case number 2023-007473 HDRB, I move to decline the windows the applicant is proposing in agreement with staff that they are not harmonious with the original windows, and add the note that the applicant can propose new windows that are not wood, but they need to be either true divided lights or simulated divided lights that have muntins on the interior and exterior of the pane.
Neither seconds.
Any other comments or discussion? And we are asking, just to be clear, we're asking the occupant, the applicant to return with a revised proposal at a date certain.
I don't think the applicant would need to return to the board. If she were proposed windows in kind, I think that could be an administrative approval.
But just to be clear, the motion then is, well, I wanted to be clear whether we were denying the application and asking for a return, or not.
My motion would be to deny the application if the applicant wants to propose new windows that are true divided lights. I think it could be an administrative approval and not return to the board.
Chair Guida and Member Aguilar, I think that probably to enforce a motion like that, it should probably best be cased in terms of a condition that is approved on the condition that plans be redrawn to include a different kind of window. I don't know that you can decline because if a project is declined, the applicant can always redraw it and apply again. you know, so there's nothing that's not, you know, submitting a redrawn design.
Okay, so approve with condition, I think is the better.
That would be enforceable.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? How is it that the other folks within my neighborhood in the historic district were able to get these windows that I'm now requesting?
Status of their property may be different. So are we amending the motion, withdrawing the motion?
I will start fresh to
Okay.
avoid confusion. All right, in case number 2023-007-473-HDRB, I move to approve the submittal under the condition that the applicant resubmits a new window type to staff that more closely mimics the historic windows with true divided lights. The applicant has the option in regards to material, it will not be required that they are wood.
Are you requiring that on the primary facades only or all window openings?
On the non-primary facades. The primary facade would be wood.
Okay.
Any other seconds?
Member Beachhead?
I understand your motion, but I feel like maybe this is a different proposal being framed as a condition. I'm not sure. For one, I'm not sure the applicant agrees with the condition. And I think I would be more comfortable if we would just suggest a postponement for a resubmittal in order to get this right, because we're not dealing with a in-kind replacement. There's not an example to look to make sure that this matches the historic photograph that's part of the record.
That would be fine for me too, and I'm happy we can let the motion die, and if you want to take another stab at it, I'm happy to see it again.
We need to vote on the motion, or can we withdraw it?
Are you going to withdraw your motion?
I can withdraw.
And I feel like we might just want to hear from the applicant about what's possible here if the applicant agrees with the condition that the windows on the primary facade be true divided light wood windows, with the remainder being true divided light, but with possibly another more affordable material such as metal clad.
Wood windows are very expensive. I said I have 28, 27 windows I need to replace. Most of them are going to be on now the primary facades that you all designated last time. So maybe we can make a compromise, because again, I don't want to have two different kinds of windows. I mean, to me, that won't look right. That's going to be tacky. So, I mean, they have so much great material, especially with their climate. I need something that's going to last and be conducive and look nice throughout the remaining time of while I'm there and whoever takes over this house. Is there any way that we could go with the facades, grids on the outside like you're requesting, but they're not be wood? They could be the metal on the outside and so forth. Because when you're walking by, can you really tell? You can't tell what's on the inside. I just need to be able to afford these windows, and I'd like them to all match. Yeah. No experts.
Let me swear you in, sir. You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Florian Griego, 9245 South Farmer Avenue, Tempe, Arizona. Okay, so just a little bit of clarification. So the options that we have available through our different manufacturers, we do not have a wood exterior window. Our wood windows that we have available are either vinyl clad or metal clad. So the exterior mullions with what we have available would also be matching. Proposed cost, if we, just to give you an idea of the cost difference between a vinyl window, which is what was proposed originally, and a wood window, it's gonna about double the cost of each. That would be the financial. So,
You?
And I would hope that you would, I mean, you saw the windows. I mean, they're horrific. And so I would hope you at least want something in the right direction to mimic what was there and preserve the historic value of the house versus nothing at all, because where you're going, I can't afford and it won't happen, unfortunately. So just be very honest and realistic.
So back to the board. I think what's at stake here is a requirement or guidance to the applicant or more acceptable proposal for replacement windows, at the very least, on the primary facade.
Along the lines of Member Beachside's proposal, I think that we've sort of reached an impasse on being able to condition an approval in this particular case without having more information from the applicant. So I would move that in case 2023-007473 HDRP 802 Don Cavero, that the motion be tabled and reset for a date certain, the next available date for a resubmission, meeting with window proposals that meet the considerations set forth by the board in tonight's hearing.
Should I have a second?
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
And just to add to the board's motion tonight, the intent is for you to come back with a window package proposal that may be a metal-clad wood window, a vinyl-clad wood window, but one which shows, as Member Aguilar Medrano pointed out, exterior muntins, the impression of through divided light windows, unlike these, and especially so on the primary facades, and as much as is possible to replicate what we know in photographic evidence is the light pattern on those two particular primary facades. Good luck with your project. We'll see you soon. Okay, so the next case is 600 Old Santa Fe Trail. This is Ramon's case. Ramon is your applicant in the room. Okay, very good.
This is case 2023-007428 HDRB. 600 Old Santa Fe Trail. It's a non-contributing commercial structure in the downtown and east side historic district. The applicant requests of approval to build a detached 190 square foot shed. Seen here outlined in red, 600 is located at the corner of East Santa Fe Avenue and Old Santa Fe Trail. The site includes approximately 5,200 square feet of building and a 1,100 square feet of canopy. The old Santa Fe Trail site was a retail fuel facility since at least 1958 and is currently operated as an automobile repair shop. The style is territorial revival with brick coping. The main building and canopy do not appear to have been altered, and the shed would be located behind the main building in this image and used to house environmental remediation equipment. I picked this picture because I like the black car. The shed would be on the west side of the existing structure shown here with the red arrow. Once remediation, the completion, the applicant expects it to be completely removed. This is the proposed site plan and the shed outline in red. Floor plan, roof plan, and sections. It's a simple box with a man door and a roll-up security door. Proposed elevations. The walls will be stuccoed with a cementitious stucco to match the main building. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. Staff recommends that upon completion of the remediation project, the shed equipment be removed. The structure is intended to be project-specific and temporary in nature. Should the applicant want to retain the building, it will have to be reviewed and approved by the Historic Review Board. Now, do you have any questions?
Yes. So Ramon, under what basis does this meet district standards? Either for walls or windows and doors?
Yes. Walls and windows and doors and height.
Okay, but like,
material.
I don't see a lot of CMU buildings going up in the downtown and east side historic district. Wouldn't this building be required to be stuccoed?
It will be stucco with cementitious stucco to match the existing.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. The drawings didn't convey that. So we'll have a stucco exterior.
Correct. Cementitious stucco to match existing.
Okay. And the metal doors will be painted to match the building, I suppose.
I didn't get that from the applicant, but I will let you know what he thinks.
And then just a question, what authority do we have to say that the building is temporary?
Well, this might be another Heather question, but as I understand, if it's intended to be in place for over a year, that needs to be approved through the Historic Design Review Board and meet all historic standards. Heather, can you elaborate any further on that?
Argueta, previously, as you've seen in the drawing, was proposed. In this particular case now, since we have the new information that they're going to stucco the building, I believe, since there is a door opening and an overhead door opening, and it's not just a concrete box, that this may, if it's the pleasure of the board, not have to come back to the Historic District Review Board. But the intent originally was to have a CMU building and that step.
Okay, so in effect, this is a permanent building?
In effect, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And we could, you know, I don't see the board having any authority to say, take it down. It's maybe the owner's intent, but it could be with us for a long time.
I'll let the applicant speak to the duration, but it's my understanding that this remediation project can take 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank
you. I'd also like to point out that I worked with the applicant on modifying the design from a pitched roof to a roof that appears to have parapets and a shed roof that drains off of the side. And there is a flue stack where effluent will be able to leave the building, and they worked with me and brought that down to 14 feet as opposed to what was originally proposed, which is approximately the height of the existing main building.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions for Ramon before we go to the applicant? Please come forward and be sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Scott McKittrick. My address is 5454 Venice, East Albuquerque. So, where to start? The
site is a historic leaky underground storage tank site. Contaminant of concern at the site is volatile organic hydrocarbons. In my mind, it's critically important that this shed be allowed to be built to ensure protection of human health and the environment. I don't know how familiar you are with leaky underground storage tank sites. Volatile organic hydrocarbons have the potential to move upward and migrate into buildings and impact human health. Additionally, the presence of those hydrocarbons in soil and groundwater is injurious to the environment. And so it's a critical issue, and I have no doubt that you are all understand the importance of this. In terms of the time frame that the building will be in place. So traditionally this facility is regulated by the New Mexico Environment Petroleum Storage Tank Bureau. And they are both the regulator of the site and also the funding agency for the cleanup through the New Mexico Corrective Action Fund, which is basically money that comes every time a load of fuel goes out to be sold. A certain amount of money comes into the fund. Fund acts basically as insurance for cleanup of sites like this site. So when they procure equipment for use to remediate a site, including the structure, what they traditionally do is once the remediation is complete, the site is ready to receive no further action status, they remove the structure. And I wish I could tell you every time they remove the structure. My experience is most of the time they remove the structure. I have seen situations like a site we worked on in Socorro where there was a shed that was just a tough shed that was put on the site. And the owner said, I wouldn't mind keeping that. The state said, sure, we'll leave it for you. But if you have the option to condition the approval that the building be removed, I as the proponent of this would be amenable to that. The state of New Mexico, I think, would be amenable.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you for that explanation. Sorry. Member
I
Bendeler.
was slow on the draw.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Maybe you know or don't know about this, but there was a long-term remediation project just up the street at the corner of Old Santa Fe Trail and Paso de Peralta, where there were also gas stations, and it's now food trucks. And I just don't recall, was there a shed or a structure of some sort there, or do you have any knowledge?
I don't have knowledge of that.
Thank you.
Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Anyone online? Okay. Question for the applicant, the metal doors that we see, well, two questions. The proposed stucco on the exterior of the building, cementitious stucco, will it be the same color stucco as the main building?
Correct.
Okay, and then are both the roll-up door and the man door able to be painted?
Yes.
Okay, and they'll be painted similar color or the same color?
Yes, understanding your desire for that, we will definitely do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those were my questions. But being as how we've had public comment, we're back to the board for a motion. Remember, you'll be statusing this building in 50 years.
Sure, I'll make a try at it. Thank you. So I do think it's important that we have some condition on this. And I don't know if we have the authority or not. It's a really good question, but I'm going to assume that we do. Because I think it's absolutely, we wouldn't approve this project if it weren't the necessity of it and the temporary nature of it. But I think the necessity speaks for itself. And I think it would be silly for us to try to design something that looked like a little house or something that territorial style to match the existing gas station. I think it should just be what it is and to be made as nondescript as possible, which is what I think you're accomplishing here. So in case 2023-007428 HDRB 600 Old Santa Fe Trail, I move that the project be, that the application be approved as submitted, noting in addition that the applicant has represented that it will be stuccoed and cementitious stucco to match the existing gas station building, and that the doors will also be painted to match, and that the approval is conditioned on the understanding that this structure will be removed as soon as the remediation is completed and the authority is given for removal, and that if it has not been removed by 5 years from the date of approval, that the applicant will return to the board for board to decide how to proceed.
Aguilar Madrano will second.
You, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Valdo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Coming in. Next item is number 15. This is the HDRB calendar approval. Yes, Heather.
Chair, I'm sorry. I thought we would have to hear the 771 West Manhattan.
Well, I guess we moved that to the end, so
Yeah, so
it would be 16. Okay. Heather, are you presenting the calendar, or does it need a presentation?
Chair Guida and member of H Board, we did do what, we changed the previous one that, then the new requested, so we did change it, and, it's up to the board now to go ahead and make a motion on it.
Okay. I suppose we don't need public comment on this. We haven't had a lot of it tonight. Motion from the board.
Beachside moves to approve the calendar as presented tonight for the next calendar year.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member, excuse me, Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Valdo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano?
Yes.
Member Beachside?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
You, so then back to 771 West Manhattan. Ramon is your applicant in the house.
I like Heather to double check that she doesn't have a Raul Dominguez on Zoom.
Chair, I did text the number on the application, and a Diana Torres Mora showed up online, and I just want to confirm that you are or are not here for 771 West Manhattan. You may speak.
Yes, so I'm actually Raul Dominguez.
Perfect.
I'm actually not on my computer for Zoom, so that's why Diana Torres comes up.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, thank
So
you.
Ramon will make the presentation, and then you'll be given the chance to speak after.
Okay.
Great. Take it away, Ramon.
This is case 20230074332 HDRB 771 West Manhattan. It's a single-family residence in the West Side Guadalupe Historic District. The status is non-contributing. The applicant requests approval to remove asphaltic roofing and replace with metal pro-panel roofing color crimson red. 771 is located on the north side of the street and at the corner of Manhattan and Amado. The property is shown here outlined in red. The architectural style is ranch with a pitched roof and has a visible presence on the streetscape. This is the south elevation facing Manhattan. This would be the main entrance, the east elevation with camera facing west. These are some Photos of the north and west elevations have very limited visibility. This is a slide of the roofing sample and the color selected. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure remain as non-contributing per 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures, and the re-roof be approved as proposed.
Ramon, had you discussed with the applicant the possibility of replacing the roof material in kind with asphalt shingles?
I believe that I'll let the agent for the owner answer that question, but I believe that it's my understanding that the owner preferred the superior weathering and long-term life of the pro panel as opposed to the asphalt. He's had numerous leaks over the years and trying to avoid that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ramon before we go to the applicant? Yes, Member Aguilar-Madrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. Ramon, have you seen a sample of the metal material in person, the roof material?
I have not, but I'm familiar with that product and manufacturer.
Do you know, is the finish matte or is it shiny?
It's not shiny, but I wouldn't call it matte either.
Satin, maybe?
Let's have the agent answer that question more specifically.
Okay, and then the other question I was going to ask, the code doesn't provide much guidance that I could find on pitched roof color for roofs, but I was wondering if you'd had any conversations with the applicant. There seems to be another option for red. It was called rustic red, which is a little bit more muted, whereas the red they're proposing is described as bright red. Did you ever talk to them potentially about the rustic red as an alternative?
When I originally talked to the applicant, the color was rustic red, but when I got the sample, the crimson red was circled. So I believe that he would be willing to sub that out.
Okay, thank you, Ramon.
Member Beachhead.
Chair Guida. Ramon, just to be clear, this is not a status case, correct? It's simply the re-roofing. Okay.
Let's move to the applicant. Applicant, you'll have to be sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Raul Dominguez. My address is 3509 John Kim Lane, 87507, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Dominguez. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us about the color choice?
So the color choice was just generally from the owner himself. So the owner himself, he actually lives next door to that house. And he generally used to do everything himself, so he was very active, and he had actually worked on the roof over the years, but now he's actually sick, so he doesn't have too much time to kind of go up on the roof and kind of fix it yearly. And since on his, like the house that he actually lives in, he actually has pro panel roof, and that's why he wanted to go with pro panel roof, because he just thought it was a better system. As well as for the color, he just wanted to go with that color. I'll be willing to kind of change the color if you guys needed it.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I see, there are other pro panel roofs nearby. The houses just to the north, one is corrugated, painted metal, and then there's another red pro panel roofs north of there. Questions for the applicant from the board? Any members of the public wishing to speak on this case? Either in person or online? Okay, back to the board. Or any other questions for Ramon or the applicant, or perhaps a motion? Member Aguilar-Madrano.
Thank you, Chair Guida. I will make a motion. If everyone's ready. The case number is loading. There we go. All right. in case number 2023-007-432 HDRB at 771 West Manhattan Avenue. I move to approve the application with the condition that the applicant uses rustic red as the shade of red rather than crimson red, as indicated in the packet.
Each side seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes, and I'd just like to make one comment. I probably should have made it before. I just wanted to note that this could have been a different outcome in my mind if this was a contributing structure, because asphalt roofing could be part of the contribution that it makes. And I do think that replacing asphalt with pro-panel can often be a mistake in historic structures, but this is a non-contributing building, and certainly it's consistent with other roofs in the neighborhood.
You? We finished voting? Okay,
Motion has been approved.
thank you. Mr. Dominguez, thank you for joining us.
Okay.
We are at the end. We have discussion items from staff. Heather, are there any?
RFP request for proposals. Did have a pre-proposal conference, and there are lots of firms that are interested in Santa Fe and project. So the close date of the general plan update is going to be amended to December 15th. There's been a request from folks due to the Thanksgiving holiday to have a little extra time and staff. And then at the beginning of the year, once we've had the opportunity to review the proposals, we'll be able to present the winning bid. So there's progress on that, as well as the progress on the zoning code updates. And there's been meetings with the Citizens Advisory Committee on the assessment report. There's going to be another one with the Technical Advisory Committee. The assessment report will provide a guide for which we proceed forward on the hygiene portion of the zoning code update, then parsing out what will be key issues as identified by that will be handled in phase 2.
Cool. Thank you, Heather, and thanks to you and your team for all the hard work on this. It's important. Matters from the board? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Member Guida, or Chair Guida. Just a question for staff. You may not know the answer to this, but I'd like to just toss this out here and see if maybe you can report back there. You're probably aware that there were new tennis courts at St. John's College on Camino Cruz Blanca have been repaired. And with the new fencing, they've now installed privacy screens around both the pickleball courts and the main tennis courts that really are opaque and have the effect of turning these into what looks like, non-transparent structures that clearly would not be permitted under our ordinance, both by color, et cetera. I understand these are replacements, but I don't believe there were any privacy screens on the chain link fences that were there previously. And in fact, it's not exactly a replacement. They've added pickleball courts. So my question is whether or not this came to staff for administrative approval.
Chair Guida, Member Bienvenue, it did come for administrative approval, and the condition was that they would remain transparent, just because of the utilitarian nature of tennis courts. Typically, we wouldn't allow for chain link, but tennis courts typically have these. And so the screening was not permitted under the administrative approval. I will research the building permit to see if there was something changed with that.
Okay, so I guess the same two-part question. One is answering whether or not any approval was given. Second, if not, what the next person.
Gary.
Yeah, Chair Guida and Member Benvenu. I will check it out when I do the inspection, so make sure that it's correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other matters from the board? I had just one thing to say. I'll try to keep it brief. Adam Johnson earlier kind of talked about the issue of reporting of staff reporting administrative approvals back to the board. And, I think it probably comes from a good place that, that there is a desire for some transparency, but I guess I personally disagree with the premise of that. We're a citizens board. We're not here to check the homework of staff, especially when it comes to administrative approvals, right? The underlying premise is that these things are well articulated in the code. There is a tremendous amount of casework that has to come to this board for additional review, beyond the review of staff and their supervisors, and up to this board for additional comment. I don't know that we necessarily need to police staff in that regard. My feeling is that, trying to kind of unite this under an idea about professionalism. Staff, hopefully we're hiring staff who are planners, who have preservation expertise, who understand architecture. We ask a lot of staff, and I'm hoping that city continues to hire qualified staff to do that work, and they have the guidance to do so. This is not a board of planners. This is a board of citizens. But the issue of professional expertise also comes down to, some of the conversations that we had tonight, particularly when it comes to John Murphy's report. John Murphy is a historian, a preservation expert, and I really am troubled by the number of instances in which staff is disagreeing with those professional recommendations, particularly around historic status, and not making particularly informed arguments for a status case. This is not to lay this all on staff. This is to say that I really would hope that we could develop a better way of talking about why something might be contributing to a historic district. This was the slapdash part of our code. It's important. I happen to work with this because I work with the National Park Service, but I am not I don't have a doctorate in architectural preservation. I'm not an uber expert in the field. And I guess, Heather, my main question about this is that, in light of these different roles, right, we rely on staff to have a certain level of training and professionalism and planning and perhaps preservation. This is a citizens board. We don't always have to agree, but we do have to have some alignment here about what we're talking about. I know it's been brought up before, both in terms of discussions with you, in Lisa's report about the Preservation Division years ago. The recommendation has been made before that it would probably benefit both staff and this board to do some historic preservation training. I'm wondering if we can revisit that conversation.
So, do support training of our historic staff. We did have we were unable to invite the board members because of limited budget, but our preservation staff did attend the National Commission's training for preservation, abortion by neglect, and there were several topics. But certainly we can continue. With reference to the recommendations that are made by staff, we do have a lot of expertise. And approach might be more conservative with staff than maybe with Mr. Murphy, but it's not intended to be obstruction. And Just on a side note, in terms of the number of cases that we review, we recently put together some metrics. So for permits relating to historic and administrative approvals, there are 395 that have been done as of October 18th. For Historic Districts Review Board cases, 101. Archaeological cases are 44. And historic inspections are 172 as of October 15th. And there are also permits that were reviewed as well, in addition to all of that. So the administrative approvals certainly are required.
Yes, John?
I can hardly resist
Please.
to throw in my 2 cents into the comments you just made, which are very much appreciated. On the issue of staff recommendations versus Mr. Murphy's, I personally think Mr. Murphy's HICPs are extraordinarily informative. I do not, though, think that his conclusion is necessarily to be any more considered persuasive just by virtue of the fact that he wrote it than anyone else's. That is his opinion based on his factual analysis. And I think that staff's opinion is of equal, if not greater weight, particularly since HICPs aren't required. If the HICP was actually being done pursuant to a contract where every case for us, a HICP was being done by an independent consultant, I think it would have to be a different story. But in this case, these are paid for by the applicants. They're only done when the applicant seems to choose to do them. I find it extremely helpful, again, for background information. All free to disagree with. And I'm certainly always very interested in what staff's perspective is, which I think is highly informed as well. On the issue of the administrative approvals, I find it very helpful, or would find it very helpful if we did get some kind of report. And it's absolutely not for the purpose of second guessing staff. When I ask, was there administrative approval, it isn't because I want to say, why did that happen? It's just because I just want to know if approval was given, end of story from my perspective. But if it wasn't given, that means that someone just did something without any approval, and we need to think. So I think it's very helpful, and I know it's very difficult to find that information on a case-by-case basis when we ask for it. I think it would be just as simple if a list was generated periodically, not even with any background information, just saying case number and the address and just saying gate approved, or whatever the case may be. Again, not to second guess the judgment behind that, but just so we know when we see something like this tennis court, whether or not that was approved or whether it was done.
John, any other thoughts? Okay. We'll move on to next meeting. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 28th, 2023. Cecilia will still be out. I will be out of town for work.
Yeah, so Chair Guida, I'm scheduled to travel for work that week also. Has not been confirmed, but I think it will likely that I will also be absent. So there may be an issue of.
We may have a federal government shutdown, in which case we'll be here. But I guess I was looking for someone to, do we have a quorum? I would imagine if with just 3 out, we might still have one. I've asked Member Beachside and she may turn me down earlier, but Member Benvenu, would you be willing to chair?
Well, Member Beachside and I discussed that just before the meeting started, and I said I think that she's the appropriate person with her longevity and expertise, but I'm more than happy to do it if she declines.
Excellent. Sounds good. I think that's it. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Leilani Madrano so moves.
Second?
Either seconds.
All right, roll call.
Member Baldo.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Thank you, and thank you all.